Hey everybody, happy Saturday, and we're hopefully those are in the blizzard east coast of the United States are able to get some internet access to watch us at least. Today I'm here with Jennifer Gordon. You want to say hi for a second?
Hello, everyone.
We were just talking about how Jennifer has two choices for internet, crap and crappier, and she's got crap, so we're in good luck. Or we're good. We're fortunate that she chose the correct of the two crappies. I was saying right before we went live that my first exposure to you was, I think, on Deeper Than Dogma last year on the gender roles issue or topic. But it stirred up memories that I had seen a couple of your prior videos and somehow had stumbled over your YouTube channel at some point. But you've had a YouTube channel for years, for like 7 years or something, right?
Yeah, it's been quite a while now. I look back at some of my early videos and I was like, what the hell was I talking about? Like random stuff, like completely, like whatever popped in my head, I would just do a video on it. It was like something that just upset me in the day, video. Something I thought was cute, video. You know, everything. I think my first day I was on YouTube, I did like 3 videos in one day. I was mad woman, just going nuts. Yeah.
A lot of time on your hands, apparently.
Yeah, my job definitely affords me some free time to sit and do whatever it is I want. So.
Yeah, we were saying right beforehand that you were in Guam. How did you land in Guam?
Yeah, my husband is stationed here, so I kind of followed him. He got shipped over here, and so did I. I'm kind of like his baggage.
Is he U.S. military?
Yeah, United States Navy.
Oh, okay.
So.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And he's taking a shower now, it sounds like. So hopefully that's not too loud.
No, I can't hear it at all.
Okay,
but now
good.
We all know it.
Well, yeah.
So I just also mentioned that I was wearing my flannel shirt, which everybody gives me crap about looking like I'm wearing PJs on the air. So then I'd considered wearing a white shirt. But then as soon as I ran downstairs to get my coffee, my wife's like, I can see your nipples. And I'm like, all right, well, I'm not wearing a white shirt then. Although I thought it would be a kind of an interesting twist to today's hangout.
Yeah, you'd have to pan your camera down a little too.
I can lift it up.
There you go.
That way I can maybe reveal one at a time, or
get some water. Get some water on there, like a spray bottle or something.
Yeah. Anyway, I was going to make a joke about if Dragnut's watching, he knows what joke I was going to pull. He knows what I've got on my bedstand right here. So, man, so many avenues to go for. There's so many routes I could take at this point, but I won't. So you've been in the community in terms of YouTube for a while. And I've been following, I think I started following your stuff on G+, maybe in September or something, and found the few posts, it's not a lot of posts, but the posts you do put out there are interesting to me and seem, or the comments that I've seen you make in Hangouts, or you had started a series with Kevin Jandis for at least the pilot episode.
Yeah, that kind of fell apart on me, but it's all good.
And they were on topics. So I think I share an interest in having discussions about other things other than the normal back and forth in the great debate community. And so, but before we get, maybe we'll talk about that later. Maybe we'll talk about the Hangout later. But first, maybe I'm curious what your past is, what was your, were you brought up in a faith, or what's been your kind of the road that Jennifer's traveled a little bit?
Yeah, I really wasn't brought up in a faith. I mean, my parents never really, I mean, when they were together, I was too young to know what God was, or, who he was, or she was, whatever, But my dad was a Baptist, and And so, like, when I was at a young age, about 8 years old or so, I think, was when my first experience going to a Baptist church. And, you go through the whole, uh, go up to the front of the church and get on your knees and say this, repeat after them kind of prayer, to have Jesus save you and invite him into your life. And so it was kind of weird. Like, I was still too young to understand what was going on, but yet here I am, saying I proclaim my faith, and Jesus saved me, but I never really believed it. I guess it was just kind of something I did, but I didn't know the meaning behind it, kind of sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, you know, I don't really think that counts as. I mean, I guess I could say I was Baptist because my parents were, or my mom wasn't, but my dad was. But I don't really know if people, there's so many people that wouldn't count that. Some people would. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, that was my first experience as far as religion goes, and obviously with me not understanding it, my little kiddo brain was like, "What the heck's this crap all about?" And as I got older, I started reading more and more of it, and eventually I came to the point where I got tired of trying to back up the claims that were made in the Bible, and trying to, I couldn't be. I found myself in like kind of a moral dilemma of, having, do I want to keep telling people I believe this and telling people that I'm saved and that they can be saved too, or do I, tell them the truth? The truth doesn't sound that
When was
great. What's that?
when was that? When was that around?
Oh, that was
When were you
much
going through
later.
that?
That was probably maybe around 20, 23, 22, 23.
Uh-huh.
That's about when so there was a break in there because I went into the military. So my faith kind of got put on hold. It was kind of not as important to me because I was off doing other stuff. Going overseas and fighting wars is not a time. I mean, I guess it's a good time to be praying, but it's not a good time to be like studying the faith. You kind of just put your hands together and hope for the best, I guess.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, so from like 17 to 21 was kind of my was in the military block that I didn't really focus on religion too much. And then once I got back out, I started dating a girl who got me back into it. And so that's when I started studying back up on it again, coming
When was that?
across this
This is in
around.
your mid-20s?
Yeah, this was probably around 22 is when 21, just got out of the military, and I just turned 21. About maybe 6 months after that is when I started dating this girl. And so probably still 21 to 23 is when I started, finding myself still doing this, these, you know, jumping through hoops to try to make this, this work in my mind kind of thing.
Right.
And even got to the point where I was like, okay, what I need to do is I need to like really get serious about this, and if someone's going to give me the answers, it'll be God. And that's kind of what I was hoping in my head, is like, if I just throw myself at it and show God that I'm actually serious about this, that he'll reveal himself to me. Because I never had that feeling of, like I said, I didn't really think of myself as saved because I never had that warm, fuzzy feeling that most people have when they're like, oh, and Jesus entered my heart, the Holy Spirit entered me, and everything was different. My life was just, never be the same, da, 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 da. Never had that feeling. I was just like, okay, now what? And everything felt the same. I was still the same person. So, I kind of had to reconcile that, well, either God's ignoring me, or I'm on the right track and he doesn't need to give me that warm fuzzy feeling to, whatever. So all these things are kind of going in my head. So I'm like, in order to get the answer, I need to really just throw myself at this. And so I decided to go to seminary school. And it was at seminary school when I started asking myself and, of course, my, instructors, like these really, really, I wouldn't say tough questions in the grand scheme of things, but as far as when it comes to religion, they're very difficult questions for the religion to have to, to answer, and to give an honest answer for. And of course, my instructors didn't like that. And, I didn't like that either because, it's kind of a scary thing when you're losing your faith, and you're not sure what, like at that time, I didn't even know what the hell an atheist was other than, someone who's going to hell. And, and I'm like, well, we looked at them as heathens and sinners and, reprobates and da 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 da. And, I never really personally, did the whole hellfire damnation kind of approach to, saving people, but, but I had heard enough about it to know that that's what I was supposed to think of them. But as far as what an actual atheist was, and knowing that you could still be a good person being an atheist was just completely not in my mind at the time. And, so yeah, it was kind of this thing where I was asking these questions, having issues in my mind, not getting answers from my instructors who should know plenty more than I do. I was always getting, it's always funny because I would always get the answer of, yeah, I have a question about the Bible. Well, pray to God. God will give you the answer. Okay. Well, I have a question about God. Look it up in the Bible. And I'm like, so it was always this, if you have a question about God, look in the Bible. If you have a question about the Bible, ask God. And I'm like, well, I can't talk to God because God never answers me. Like, I didn't want to tell him that because, that's kind of like, that's a no-no to say when you're in seminary school. Everyone's supposed to have this relationship with God. And here I was asking for, I pretty much asked for one thing my whole entire life that I've ever asked God. I should go back, to my transition. Back when I was younger, the reason I didn't transition was because of my faith. Like, it was because I thought that my transition was, Satan trying to bring me over to the dark side, so to speak, as a way to take me away from God. And, there's that verse in the Bible that, once you're saved, no one can take you away from them, or no one can take you away from God's hand or whatever. I can't remember the exact quote of it, but so that was really scary for me because, again, never felt like I was saved, kind of didn't have that warm fuzzy feeling, wasn't quite sure if God heard me or if Jesus actually did his thing inside me, whatever it was that was supposed to happen. So so that was really freaky to me. And so I was like minding my P's and Q's as much as I could. And, obviously I screwed up. I'm a kid and, humans screw up in general. But my transition is something that I struggled with for the longest time because of that, and postponed because of my religious beliefs. So
what point would you say that you were aware of that, that you were holding something back, that you were, when you realized that you wanted that you had a desire, or not a desire, but a need to be someone else, and you were suppressing that?
um, okay, so there's a few different kind of major stepping points, I guess you would call them, in my transition anyway. I don't know if it's the same for others, but like, I knew I was different when I was about 5 years old. Like, I didn't act like most little boys did, and I didn't hang around the people. Like, most little boys hang around with other little boys, and most little girls hang around with other little girls. I preferred to actually hang around with the little girls. And back when I was in school, like, hanging out with the girls was considered, um, before kids knew what gay was, before sexuality and gay was, like, you were just kind of like icky and, ooh, girls have cooties, and you were just like this weirdo that hangs. Why do you like girls? Oh, no, that's just no. Um, so I went through a lot of that, and then
Mhm.
when, of course, sexuality came into it, um, kids start knowing that, oh, well, boys start finding girls attractive, and girls start finding guys attractive, and that's what we knew. We didn't know that there was more to it than that. And so there was a point in school where I was like frickin', Studley McStudmuffin, because I was always hanging out with girls, and everyone thought that was cool. And they're like, oh, how do you get with all the girls? And da da da, you got all these girls hanging out with you. And um, of course, that didn't last long. It probably lasted about a year and a half in school. And then, people figured out what gay was and lesbians were. And so then I became known as the gay guy, of course. But yeah,
No longer Studley McStudmuffin or whatever.
yeah. Then I was, Limpy McLimprist. Um, but yeah, it was, and I'm sorry if that's stereotypical. It's just strictly a joke. I know, obviously,
That's
I
fine.
have all people know that gay people come in all shapes, sizes, forms, masculine, feminine, all that good stuff. But just a joke. But that's kind of what they treated me as, kind of the effeminate queer, so to speak. And it wasn't everyone. There were still people that, it wasn't like they had a hatred for me. It was more like they just tried to keep their distance from me. So I wasn't really friends with anyone. I was mostly just acquaintances with everyone.
Yeah,
Um,
it seems like it's a little bit of I don't know what to do with you type of thing. Like
yeah,
people have this, don't know, so they just avoid it altogether, right? Because I
yeah.
think that,
It's like they didn't know what box to put me in. So
right,
they're just like, I'm just gonna set you to the side until I know where I'm gonna fit you into this thing I call my life. So,
yeah,
but yeah, that year and a
well,
half though, that was freaking. I was like, well, me and one other kid that I think he might have been gay too, but I don't consider myself gay. I consider myself pan, but I mean, in the sense that they thought I was gay. I
right.
think he might. I think he might have been in the same, on the same track as me, as maybe not trans, but like actually enjoyed, you know, dating men. So
Yeah, growing up in New Hampshire in the 80s, there was no one who was out in my school at all. And I know, looking back that that wasn't the case at all. That you just had people who were just suppressing it, and who are today out there who are gay. That I would love, I there are individuals who at the time I suspected, but it was in a very mean or a confused way that we referred to the individuals. So, and I'm
yeah,
sure that that just terrified them. It's just really rough now when I think about it. So,
yeah. I don't know how small, how small the town you grew up in was, but like I think the population of the city I grew up in at the time I was going to school was about 3,000.
hmm. Yeah,
So
that's
it's
smaller.
very small. So
Yeah,
what about your town? Was it similar?
it was 15,000.
Okay, a little
But I think
bigger.
there were maybe two African American individuals at the school. Um, out of four, out of at my high school, I had 400 kids. So when I distinctly remember when I found out who was going to prom with one of them, and that was a big thing. It was like, oh my gosh, that person's going to prom with them, and you look at it now, and it's like it's ridiculous, but that's what happens when you're in a very uh, for lack of a better term, a monochromatic or a very a homogenous group, to have the outliers within there. The people just don't know what to do with it. And then I get out to college and it's complete. It wasn't that I certainly wasn't racist before, but I certainly found that I had a lot of deep, deep dispositional attitudes that weren't coming out. They weren't being expressed, but they were there just from not being in situations that I was. It was all of a sudden I was in unfamiliar situations, and that was something that I discovered a lot of my own attitudes towards things that needed to shift. I had no problem shifting them, but they were a surprise to me. There were things I didn't know that were there. So
Yeah, the I kind of had the same kind of situation when I went into the military, because you have people from all over that join, and I remember uh, getting to my school in Mississippi, and um, it's basically like 2 rooms on each side, and then you shared like a common space kitchen. Um, and I remember the roommate I had that was actually in the room I was in, being black, and that being, I don't want to say weird, but it was like a bit different for me, because like your town, we had one black family, and at the time there was one black person, well, 2 black people in the high school, and they were brother and sister. So it was kind of like, it was just not something you saw every day in that town, and it was very, I don't want to say redneckish, but it was, it had more of that country kind of living feel to it, like where pickup trucks were the norm, rather than you're more likely to see an F-150 than you are a Prius at any given time. Um, Probably outnumber them 10 to 1 at least.
at
Um,
least.
at least, yeah. But yeah, I don't know, it's weird.
Yeah, they
Like,
sorry, go ahead.
no, but like you, it wasn't like I was racist. It's just that I had been, I had grown up in a certain kind of household where some of my family members were racist, blatantly racist, using,
Mm.
very derogatory terms, pejoratives of, that specifically were geared towards a certain race of people, and they didn't discriminate against just black people. It was, Asians and Hispanics and anyone that was different than them, they had a word for it, and it wasn't a good word.
Yeah.
Um,
Very
so
much. I had very much the same experience, and it wasn't. I don't think, having known individuals, I don't think that it even crossed their mind. Like, it didn't come across as hate. It was just kind of, a lot of it was just really loose language, but extremely racist. I mean, if you would never like, things that would just, I mean, make the hair on my neck stand up now, that like at the time it was just kind of the common, way of referring. Um and so there was a lack of sensitivity, I guess, would be what it was, to what was actually being said. It was almost like they wouldn't think about it. So not hateful in a lot of cases, not hateful individuals.
mhm. Yeah,
So
it's just that I hate using this term, but in a way, that's just kind of how it was back then.
mm, no.
Um, and in some households, that's kind of still how it is, unfortunately.
Well,
It's
and it shows that exposure is everything. For me, it was anyway. It was a lot of just getting to know people that I just didn't have exposure to before. Be like, oh, okay, these things aren't big deals for me, right? So, and we were talking about that a little bit. That my kids are growing up now in a situation completely different from, or have grown up. They're now, college age, but grew up in a situation completely different from mine. Such that my son, my youngest son, maybe 4 years ago, or maybe it was before that. It was when the Prop 8 stuff was going down in California, over gay marriage. And my youngest son, said to me, he's like, "I don't get what the deal is." And he was legitimately looking for answers. He was like, "I don't understand what the deal is. Why are people upset about this, or why do people care about it?" And that was that's obviously a very different situation from 30 years before, when I was growing up. So
Yeah, absolutely. It kind of reminds me of your son's question. Kind of reminds me of that episode of South Park. I don't know if you've seen it, but where they want to change the South Park flag. The
mhm.
And so it's basically like, it's got a bunch of white stick figures, and they're hanging like a black stick figure. And so Chef kind of gets upset about it. He's like, "Can't you see this flag is racist?" And the kids are like, oh, we never even looked at them as, black and white. We just thought it was, the flag was what it was. We just looked at it as a bunch of humans. And they're like, wow, they're like so not racist that they didn't even see the color. And so it's kind of like that. It's like when you don't see the big deal about it, it's because it's such a non-issue for you.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of don't understand why it is an issue for other people. And I mean, I wish I were that way in some aspects. There are things that I don't want to say I've been forced to be involved with, but because it affects me personally, I'm not big on the LGBT community as far as like going to pride parades or volunteering for community functions and doing all that stuff. If people have questions, I'm more than willing to answer them. But as far as like putting myself out there in that kind of situation where it's a more direct kind of community helping kind of thing, that's not really my thing. But there have been times when I found myself having to care about issues that shouldn't be issues, um,
It
and I'm
certainly
like,
seemed like it certainly seemed like through your YouTube channel that some of the content you were providing was to try to um, at least speak to issues that aren't normally talked about, which I think is really healthy.
yeah, that, back then, before there was all this, and I'm sure it's probably still a pretty decent community now. I haven't done much in it in a while, but back then the YouTube community for trans people um, was kind of a big thing.
Hmm.
Um, it was kind of like the go-to place to get information about transition, and I had to mind my P's and Q's when I was saying what I was going to say, because there's a lot of things that can be misconstrued as uh, condoning something when you're just trying to say, well, here's one approach to it, and some people do this. It doesn't mean so I had to word it in a way where I was like, some people do this. I personally wouldn't choose that route, kind of, and it's kind of goofy like that, but
It's
I
really
mean,
hard, huh?
yeah, especially when you're dealing with someone's life, how they live it, and like, because a transition like this, it rearranges every like every little detail about how you live. It's I don't think there's obviously unimportant things like what I eat. Well, even that, because we live in a society where women have a certain standard to uphold as far as I'm not saying it's an actual standard, but we kind of are expected to have a certain shape, and so yeah, it kind of affects how I ate too.
Yeah, there's a lot
And
of it was funny. I was on a walk with my wife right before this, and I saw a truck that had a bumper sticker that said, "Driver has no cash. He's married," or something like that. It was like one of those, "Don't rob me" things.
yeah,
But I was like, I'm pretty sure they don't make a "she's married" type of thing, and I get the point. Like, there's a reason why stereotypes work. But as well, it's a stereotype, right? It's not everyone's situation.
yeah,
But a little bit along the lines of what you were saying in terms of being careful about what you have to say. It is, especially, I mean, with um, man, it's just tricky waters to navigate. And even earlier when you were making the joke about the limp hand, and then you had to caveat, right? Like,
yeah,
it is all about, it's really hard with the offense culture and with social justice warriors, and there's a lot of different attitudes towards this stuff, and even for individuals within that you would think have shared common goals, there's a lot of in-group, out-group. Um, uh, it's just really, really hard
yeah.
territory.
There's I think I made a video on this. I might have actually touched on it in a couple of videos, but I've actually been called not trans enough. Like, I'm
Yeah,
not transsexual enough. I'm like, what the fuck does that even mean? Excuse my language. I'm like, what the hell does that even mean? Like, I'm not trans enough. Like, I'm trans. Whether I meet your standard of what I should have done to my body or not is no consequence to me. I don't care if you think I meet a certain standard that you think I should or not.
Yeah.
You can call me whatever. You can call me a guy still. I don't care. As long as I'm happy, I'm okay with that. I've always kind of been under the under the umbrella of I'm gonna live my life, you live your life. We'll get along fine. Um, even if you tell me what you think I should do, I don't have to listen to you. I don't have to take offense to it. I don't have to, put any emphasis behind what you say to me, because if you think I should live a certain way, I'm just gonna that's your opinion. Okay, you're allowed to have that. I'm allowed not to follow it. As long as you're not trying to, like, you're gonna do this or else I'm gonna do something, bad to you. I care less what you tell me. I don't know. I guess everyone's kind of like, oh, you shouldn't say this because you shouldn't you shouldn't be telling people how to live their life. And I'm like, it's just an opinion.
Right.
Like the whole I don't know if you're aware, but there was like this whole big thing about the word tranny. And like, I don't care if someone calls me a tranny. I will tell other people, I'm like, look, you got to be careful when you use that word, because there are some out there who will flip their friggin' lid if you use that word. Me, I could care less. Whatever. To me, it's about context. It's about how you use words.
Yeah.
It's I hate saying, even when I'm just talking about it, but the N word, it's kind of like that. Like, there are certain people that can say it to each other because it's a friendly kind of like, hey, what's up, um,
My
but
tranny.
if, yeah, it's like, oh, that's my tranny friend, Jen.
Yeah.
Whatever, I don't care. But like, if they're calling you like, oh, you're nothing but a no good, messed up tranny, you're just a guy that thinks he's a girl, da 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 da. Like, okay, I'm just not gonna associate myself with you. You're free to have your opinion. I'll
Yeah.
go along my way, you go along yours. But there are people out there who will just fight tooth and nail to like try to um, kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Dictate what other people say and how
Right.
they act around you. And it's like, you can't do that. Like, it's like, it's not the world according to you. It's the world, and that's it. That's all there is.
I think it goes. I was thinking about this a bit, only because I have another issue that I've been exposed to recently, regarding a transgender individual who um, is really hung up on. There's a lot of hang up on pronouns, and pronouns are very, when you stop and think about them, the he she distinction when you're conversing about someone is quite irrelevant, actually. Unless you're getting into a particular, specific issue. For the most part, when we're referring to individuals, the gender isn't important, or certainly less so than it used to be, just because of where society is and where technology is and all of that. So you and I can have a conversation about someone, and their gender actually doesn't matter. It's not substantive to the conversation. So we could replace the pronouns, and we could invert them, and it wouldn't matter, to the substance of our conversation. Um, but the so I understand the point behind pronoun use, and I certainly endeavor myself to use, when someone is presenting themselves in a certain way, to use um, pronouns that are considerate to that presentation, to how they want to be referred to, and but there when it becomes a sticking point and becomes something that is nitpicks, it becomes a barrier. It becomes not about the issue anymore, not about there's a difficulty. I think people are having a hard time. There are people who have come to think of things a certain way, and so it becomes very difficult even for them to accept this notion. And so, but it seems to me um, it's a little like uh, there are times where it feels a little bit like when atheists want to get the God off of the dollar bill, or other smaller issues like that. That it becomes such a petty thing. Although I certainly see I understand the importance of it in the grand scheme of things, but in terms of getting people to a point of tolerance or to acceptance of these notions, those are, I see as being barriers to that. It ends up being, let's move them, persuade them otherwise, and then that will happen naturally. As people are persuaded that they should respect individuals and how they present themselves, and that there are different ways to present yourself, and that there's different strokes for different folks, and that doesn't infringe my my happiness or whatever, and I can respect them for that, and try to respect their choices that way. That will be the thing that persuades me to start using proper pronoun use, or use that they would enjoy. So it's a really interesting thing where it's like it feels like I understand your point, but by fighting that battle, you're making the war much longer. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm kind of along the same lines, and that's kind of why I kind of veered away from, which is kind of strange, but I veered away from the trans issues because it kind of got, so the issues were not really the issues. The issues became these stupid petty little things that weren't going to change anything, and they would go on for weeks and weeks and weeks. Does this sound kind of familiar? Um, and I kind of moved from. That's why I thought it was funny, because I moved from one group that did that to another group that did that, and the theist, great debate community. And that's kind of why I kind of keep a low key. I don't really, I don't try to press buttons. I don't try to, do the whole gotcha questions. I don't try to prove to anyone that what I believe is true. I'm just there to listen and see what they have to offer. I'm a big person on gathering information, and then if they happen to ask me, I'm there to offer my position,
Mm-hmm.
and possibly back it up if they ask, if they say, well, you need to back that position up. I'm just gonna be like, here's what works for me. This is how I think, the way I do, and this is why I think the way I do. May not work for you. If you want to keep believing, more power to you. But don't, it's really a problem when they start to say, oh, well, you just need to accept Jesus, da 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 da. I'm like, no, I don't. Obviously, I'm doing perfectly fine without Jesus. Oh, well, not when you die. Oh, well, prove to me an afterlife. And and then it goes down that road where they're like, if they try to push it on me, like, you need this and I have this for you, and then it's like, okay, now you need to prove why I need this. And so yeah, it'll kind of go just down, and I try not to do that too much, but because I pretty much heard most of the arguments going around YouTube. I don't want to say I've heard them all, but
I have an experience where when I moved out to start working for DreamWorks. So I was in the Bay Area for 6 years before I moved to LA, but I was still working. I worked on Ants and Shrek up there. And I had a particular individual who passed away a couple of years ago, who was gay and Christian, while I was Christian at the time when I moved out. And very much I had Bible studies back in college with gay individuals, trying to persuade them to come, and in some cases being successful, coming to church, converting to Christianity, and working towards being normal, right? Or not being gay anymore. Jesus will avail you of that. um, and in the church I think this has to do with pansexuality, or a spectrum of interests. There are some, I think, who can legitimately push or repress back an interest in the same sex, and actually be with a woman and go on and have a life that they arguably would be less fulfilled, but they would consider themselves happy. And unfortunately, there were a number of cases like that within our church, and that confuses the issue. The fact that that there are those cases makes it hard for people to believe that it's not a choice for others, or that that it's not a not that it's a choice. It's not a choice for anyone, but that there are some who don't. I have gay friends who find men and women attractive, and I have gay men who find women parts completely like repulsive, like just like have no interest at all. And so you have this broad spectrum, which I think makes the issue more difficult to discuss. But so anyway, this not discuss, but be persuasive that it's not a choice, that it's a set of conditions, and it's a very complex set of things that in almost always are out of our control. But in the case of this individual who I met and was friends with a number of years, he was gay and Christian, and he relayed this story to me of going from church to church to church, trying to find a way to not be gay and to be prayed over time and time again, and just beating himself up endlessly as he can't. And he was a highly sexual individual, someone who could not simply abstain or whatever. It was key to his happiness and his enjoyment of life, and yet had to completely thrash himself because it went counter. He couldn't figure out why he couldn't be something else. And then finally told me that he was relaying his journey, and told me, he's like, Bert, I just finally had to be okay, and that was like a huge burden lifted off of him, that he found a church that that welcomed him for who he was, and that he met other men whom he had relationships with, who also were Christian as well. And today I have gay married Christian friends who go to church every Sunday and are active in the worship service, and leaders in their church. And I think that it becomes a difficult thing where you have these two dispositions. You have a religious an interest in retaining your religious belief, and having having a relationship with Jesus, and having the Bible is very important to you, Scripture is very important to you, and you get something out of it. But then you're told, well, you can't be this and that, and these two things are integral to your happiness. And that's just man, I'll never forget him relaying the difficulty of trying to reconcile those things, and to the point where he's trying to kill himself, which happens a lot with individuals, unfortunately. So
Yeah, that story kind of rings true with me too, with my transition. As so many points that you just went over, the steps that he was taking. Obviously, I never found a church that was accepting of my transition, because by that point, like, I was not okay with myself, even cross-dressing, before I'd even known what a transsexual was, or that there's something that could be done surgically or hormonally. Before any of that, like, I was not okay with just even wearing women's clothing. And so, I struggled with this for the longest time. And remember that one thing I told you that I prayed for? Mm-hmm. That was the strength to not have this desire to wear the women's clothing or to transition when that time came. Just take that off of me, please. If you're, God, I only ask this one thing of you. Just please make my struggle less, so I can continue to live for you and do the things that you feel are right for me. Because it was so hard. And yeah, I got to the point where I have attempted suicide because of that. And but this was something I had been willing to forego for the longest time. And so, it always makes me chuckle when people are like, oh, you weren't really serious about your Christianity. You were just one of those, fly-by-night Christians. You were just like, told people you believed in Jesus, but you didn't really believe in Jesus. And I'm like, yeah. Do you understand the crap that I went through, and how much of an insult it is for you to sit there and say that I didn't give it my best, that yeah. I didn't actually believe, and that I didn't, you get all these people out there asking for, oh, God, make me rich, or God, I want this new car, or God, I want, I know I have a house, but I want a bigger house, or, oh, I want to, date this handsome guy or this handsome girl, or, all this stupid shit that doesn't mean nothing. And the only thing I asked for was for God to help me with my struggles, and in that sense would also have revealed himself to me. Like, it would have made me stronger in my faith if the struggle would have been less.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that I never got that is kind of what got me started on the, can I really continue believing if after all this time, because I didn't start my transition until I was like 24, after I'd gotten out of seminary school, gotten kicked out of seminary school, well, quit and got, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it was strongly recommended that I do not pursue seminary school any further. So, but yeah, so from 5 years old when I knew something was different, 8 years old when I first started dressing, you know, I mean, just 11 years old when I knew that the two were, kind of one and the same. Like, when I was from 8 to 11, it was not like I would dress and then I'd feel a certain thing, but I wasn't quite sure what it was that I was feeling. It wasn't until I was about 11 or 12 when I would dress that I realized that that's what made me feel like, I don't know, like myself, kind
Right.
of. I don't know. It's hard to describe, but
I think I think people have a hard time with the dress. Is that that's like an added layer, I think, that's difficult for people. That the importance of how that makes you feel, they don't realize. They kind of take for granted. You take for granted that you can be comfortable in your own skin and you can be who you want. And then where you have someone who can't be who they want, the people who don't have that experience look at it and go, what's your problem? Like, what's the big deal, right? Why is the dress important to you, right?
yeah, it's easy when, you know, when everything lines up, if the square peg fits in the square hole, nothing seems out of place. But when you're trying to jam that, circle into that square and it's just not fitting, and you realize that there's this other hole over here where it'll fit perfectly. It's kind of what it's like. And when you find that hole, it sounds weird, but like my mind is going sexual, so forgive me. When you,
I think I was there like 3 minutes ago or whatever.
oh, okay, so yeah, okay, we're good. But
when you find that hole, it's magical.
It's just this wonderful feeling, and it just gets better and better and better, and you just want to keep putting that peg in that hole and just, but yeah. So yeah, but it's like, it's for people who, like I said, that square peg fits in that square hole, they don't know any different. Like, they've never had that struggle, so of course they're not going to understand it. And I try to tell people that I'm like, I don't expect you to understand it, and I don't expect you to accept it. If you don't want to transition, then don't. That's not your thing. But to sit there and try to stop other people from living their life happily, and to try to put up all these obstacles in their way to stop them from living as close to normal of a life that they can. And I really hate that word normal, but you know what I mean by it. Most people know the colloquial sense of normal. But there are people that are like actively working to make it harder for gays and lesbians and bisexuals and transgender people to just be themselves and to live as happy of a life as they can. Because I'm never going to be happy. Obviously, I would prefer to have been born female. That's not a possibility. And I understand that no matter how much surgery I have, I'm still going to be trans. I'm not one of those people that's like, I'm now female. I consider myself a female. You'll address me as such at all times. I'm no longer trans. Kind of, they have that mentality that like once they get surgery done, certain surgery, that they're no longer trans anymore. And I'm like, no, tap into reality here. You're still trans. You will always be trans. And that kind of, and the thing is that sucks. You don't have those. Most of us don't have those experiences of, living as a little girl, growing up as a little girl.
Right.
It's just now getting to that point where some parents are recognizing this at an earlier age and, stopping hormones from taking over their body and, uh, altering their dress, and they're growing up with the, a different way to grow up. I didn't have that, and I will never have that. And it sucks to not ever be able to have that in a lifetime, because unless you believe in reincarnation, this is the one chance you get. You're never going to have a childhood again. And you kind of feel like you're missing out on something, but getting the surgery doesn't make you have a childhood as a female, and it doesn't make you have a child or an adulthood as a cisgendered, which I don't know if you know what cisgendered means, but cisgender means that your biological sex and your gender match from birth. From birth, you're happy with what you are, kind of thing. It doesn't make you cisgendered. You're still trans, regardless. And there are so many people out there that are so unhappy with this stupid little label of trans. And it sounds like I'm labeling them, but it's a reality, and but they get so uptight over this one little label that, and the stigma that goes along with it, that they want to just, divert themselves away from being trans. And I'm like, look, rather than divert yourself, trying to bend reality and dismiss the fact that you're trans, why don't we get rid of the stigma associated with it? Like, that would be the better thing, and more people would benefit from it, other than just you trying to get away from trans. And that's kind of what, the whole idea of living stealth is. I don't have an issue with that. If you, want to live your life as a female, then that's fine. I feel like you should be able to do that. And if you don't want to tell anyone, perfectly acceptable. The only people you should be, should have to tell is, those you're intimate with, because that kind of, messes with people's minds. But yeah, it's kind of hard if you want to be involved in the community, but still want to try to live stealth, because you can't have it both ways. Like, right. You can't be like, oh, I'm trans when it's going to benefit someone, but I want to live the rest of my life not trans. It's because you're putting it out there.
I think it also is important because the whole issue is that we have this binary association with gender, and by going stealth and not having it known, or by insisting that you not have the spectrum. It seems like you're almost. I feel like when the spectrum is revealed and that people can get accustomed to it, that's a better situation to be in. You want to fight the binary notion that everything fits into these two boxes, and here it is. You're trying to some degree negate. You're trying to go along with that narrative almost, but.
Yeah, so they're just jumping from one box to the other, rather than and trying to forget that middle part, and just saying, oh yeah, that middle part doesn't exist anymore. I'm in this box now.
How much do you think? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, when that middle part is like the most important part to having it be known out there that, there's a pathway there. And some people just sit in that little pathway for the rest, their whole lives. And some people move along gradually, and other people just, zip right through it. And other people are happy being in one side or the other. It's like you said, that kind of gray scale of moving from one side to the other is what we need to understand is there.
There seems to be a high correlation between societal awkwardness or uncomfortableness with their own sexuality, or with stringent societal norms that repress, and acceptance of the non-binary gender identity issues. Seems like it bridges into sexuality, and it bridges into um, what have become taboos and norms within societies. You think that that's true?
Um, yeah, I would definitely have to agree with that because I mean it's man, we're just now. I mean, we've learned a lot about sexuality and gender and biological sex and um, you know how they all tie into each other and what aspects they do and what aspects they don't tie into each other. And but there's so much more to learn, and I think we forget that.
Yeah, that was something that was exposed to me, actually. I mean, it's not that I don't think about these things, and I have a lot of conversations with my friends, and I'm fortunate to be in an environment in Los Angeles where there is great diversity, and and especially I work in the entertainment industry, which has a very open group, very diverse, and no, there's no. I think partially because there's no vendors that we're dealing with or anything that because we're creating content internally, it's really open to, you know what, like, wear whatever you want to work, be whoever you want at work. We want that diversity, and we want that. It almost seems as it's encouraged because it fosters a not only a happy environment but a very creative and positive environment. But wait, where was I going with that? Um, Shoot, I forgot how I started that whole that whole thread.
I hate when that happens.
Um, I was gonna go down that route of um, shoot, yeah, I have completely lost my train of thought. Um,
Well, I was talking, maybe I can refresh your memory. I was talking
sure.
about how we've learned so much, but there's still so much more to learn.
Mm,
And, people, what I was going to add on to that, the way we learn is by being exposed to it. The more we're exposed to it, the more it, can kind of intrigue us, and the more we can, look up stuff. There are things in biological sex that people are like, oh, it's either XX or XY, and I'm like, no, there's it's XX or XY, and it's XXY and XXYY and X. You got all kinds of freaking stuff going on in there that we just want to dismiss because XXXY makes more sense, boy, girl, like that binary, and it's just so crazy.
yeah, I remembered what it was. Is it was I was going along the lines of that. I think about this stuff a lot, but when I watched the Deeper Than Dogma episode from last year on gender roles, and I think it was around the topic of I think Caitlyn Jenner um, um, had come out publicly as trans, and uh, opened her transition to everyone, and I think that stirred the discussion there. Um, the But the whole discussion in there about men's suits having, Ozzy talked about men's suits having wide shoulders and women trying to maintain their form through their dresses, and the talk of if you call someone a dick, that's a very different thing than calling them a pussy, right? Like there are these connotations that come with this heavy loaded language that we've just become accustomed to, and so I think that then those all those binary relationships, or those all those things that we've come to think of, well, they've broken down to some degree because society has come to a point technologically that women can work in factories. You have huge machines to actually do the heavy lifting. It's no longer like my own physical strength isn't important at all to my day-to-day survival, and that's the case. My wife can do my job. She can do all the things that I can do. She can go out into the workforce and contribute, and on an equal level. And so really these barriers have been taken down, and certainly the um, knowledge of like the pill changed everything, and wide contraceptive access in cultures really changes how we can think about sex, and how we can think about gender, and how we can think about all these things, and how we can, I see it as a lifting of society above its kind of the physical restrictions that were there before are no longer there. They're no longer as relevant. And so we have people who are free to be a little, to be more diverse. We're able to have more diverse groups and not have to have these really cruel structures in place.
Yeah, and that's kind of what religion was to me. It was a cruel structure of, you know, of a certain way that I had to live. And the sad thing is it was just like everyone else had to live, and I'm like, why? Like, oh, this is so boring. Like, everyone comes in, oh, how's the family? Oh, we're doing well. Your family doing well. Da, 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 da. It's like, so boring.
Yeah.
But
Well, even
it's
in
not
terms
like I
of,
didn't.
sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say it's not like I didn't care for the people, but it's just so monotonous. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that along the lines of religion and society, I think that as I was thinking about obviously Christianity or the Bible has a lot to say about sex, about when it's allowed and when it's not. And I think in cultures where you don't have contraception, those are probably important measures for um, societies probably needed norms like that in order to not. I mean, if you didn't have some of those things in place in cultures where there was no contraception whatsoever and women are getting pregnant, if you had adulterous societies or whatnot, it would seem like it would have a detrimental effect. But to hold on to those norms in the face of current technology and current standards that we can enjoy sex more, right? Like I can have, certainly more so than someone 1200 years ago or whatever, I can have sex more frequently, and I can actually enjoy it recreationally with individuals I choose to, and have it edify my relationships with them, and not have to, I had surgery 2 years ago or something, so yeah, I don't have to use contraception anymore or whatever with my wife, and that's a different position to be in than someone 100 years ago. Um, and so it seems like a little bit we're growing and having to change the way we think about things. But these religions, much like in other areas, are holding on to norms from 2,000 years ago and attempting to impose them on modern society when the context has changed radically. It's really funny. It's kind of a queer notion when you think of it, like a really bizarre attempt to to try to address current situations with old antiquated norms.
Yeah, I don't know how. I mean, I hate asking people how old they are, but you've been around in the times of five and dime stores, right? I'm sure if I have, you have. So you used to be able to go down to the five and dime store and buy, candies and, little trinkets and stuff like that, and cool little crap. When I was a kid, it's like freaking one of the most awesome things. Of course, to me, the Bible, using these old ideas in modern society is like the idea of having a five store nowadays. You just would not be able to sell the same stuff for a nickel and 10 cents as you could back then, because inflation. Things change, things get in that case, things get more expensive, because whatever, dollar's worth more, or or dollar's worth less, or inflation itself, wages go up and prices go up, and da 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 da. It's kind of the same thing with the Bible, but yet they're a lot of people are not willing to let it go. They're just kind of trying to hang on to that five and dime store and trying to run their business that way, and finding that that they're losing money because everything that they get from their manufacturers costs more than the nickel and a dime to make, and so they're paying out more than they're actually getting in from their customers. And hopefully they realize that they can't keep doing business that way, and they change their their ways of going about things to accommodate a newer society.
Yeah. I think I don't want to, I definitely don't want to, I'm going to say something, and I don't mean to shame anyone for the choices they make, because each person's life is meant to be lived with the way that they find satisfaction and enjoyment from it. But I read one individual who had said that they abstained from sex because they feel like it potentially has a corrupting soul effect on their soul, that to some degree can't be trusted with it. Um, and That's, as I just said, that's that person's choice. But I think that stems from a belief system that has relegated that portion of our life to some I don't want to say unrealistic, but certainly repressed um, um, structure that it's so much better if you can enjoy it, right?
Yeah,
Life is so much fuller, and so much worthwhile. It's a fantastic activity, right? And so,
I
um,
agree.
yeah, and meant to be. And the fact that we can enjoy it in a different context than someone 100 years ago, 200 years ago, or whatever, is pretty remarkable and pretty wonderful. I mean, I like to think that I'm getting a little more satisfaction out of life today than someone back then.
Yeah, it's like back then it's the equivalent of um, having your cake and eating it too. You know, uh, getting the joys of sex without the I don't want to say what I keep saying repercussions of always producing a child, or a good chance of producing a child.
Yeah.
It was back then it was, you were lucky if you didn't impregnate someone through sex. Now it's like an amazing thing if you do get someone pregnant if you're on contraceptives, because it's like the complete opposite.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah,
I was able to raise my kids in a totally different way from how I was raised, where I could really just give them, I want them to be responsible and be aware of the issues, and we can have a really frank conversation about those things, very realistic conversation about them. And as long as they're protecting themselves and protecting others from any permanent harm, I want them to be making responsible decisions on that basis, and not on some taboo or artificial norm, or give them real reasons for how to evaluate situations and what they want to do with themselves. Whereas, interestingly, for my wife and I, um, she very much resents her past faith, because when we were in the year of our engagement as Christians, we started sleeping together, and completely shitting on ourselves for it all, throughout. We never got contraception because we didn't want to plan for it, but we inevitably did it anyway.
mhm.
um, it was kind of like we didn't want to plan for sin, but we fell into it time and again. And then we ended up postponing our marriage, actually, and trying to get ourselves right with our relationship with God before getting married. And then we eventually got married. But my wife looks back at that and she utterly hates it. She's like, I wish I could have just enjoyed it. I didn't have any problem with what we were doing. Um, I She certainly repented and felt the weight of it, but at the time she was also like, the struggled, or now in retrospect struggles, because she can't enjoy that. She couldn't enjoy the courting that we had, and the relationship we had, which we've been married for almost 21 years now, um, and uh, and enjoy each other thoroughly now, and it just have a much more open relationship and dialogue than we did back then. So
Yeah, I went through the same thing. I got married when I was in the military, and um, I was a virgin until I got married. So
and this was
um,
to the woman that you married.
yes.
Okay. Just to
Um,
clarify for everyone.
yeah, yeah. Sorry, I forget that there are people out there that haven't heard everything. But yeah, it's yeah, it was one of those things that I was like, to me, it was something that was easy because compared to the other thing I was struggling with, it was like, oh, sex that can wait. Fuck that. Or excuse me, God. I'm a cusser. I'm military. Still kind of carry. That's one of the things that carried over.
We're gonna have to end the broadcast right here.
I know. Sorry. I seriously try to watch my
you
mouth when I'm
you've
having a
clearly
good
not
time.
watched any of our other hangouts. I'll let you know that
No,
the holy spackle dropped like 50 C bombs in our first one. So
no, it's just something. It's nothing like I think I'm offending you or anything like that. It's just
I'm
I like
just
to
joking.
I like to keep it clean when I can, when I'm having a good conversation, when I'm just messing
This is the
around. Though.
cleanest. This is the cleanest. Just so you know, this is the cleanest of the In My Bubble series that you've.
Oh, okay. Well,
So.
see, at least I got something going for me.
We at least talk about Chris Mouty's balls once a episode. So
Well, count it
now
in
we
the
don't
notes.
now
There you go.
now we don't have to. Yes.
Check that off the list. Okay, we're good to go there. Christopher Monty's balls. Yep, good to go. Anything
So,
else we need to? But yeah, like I was like, sex was the least of my worries when it came to things that I was able to keep at bay to live for Christ. And um, you know, the weird thing was is when I got married and I had sex for the first time, I was like, this like. Maybe it's because it was my first time, but I was like, this is it? This is sex? Like, this is what the big deal's about? Yeah. There, of course, when I figured out what the hell I was doing, different story. But yeah, like I kind of wish I would have, been a little more exploratory.
and just to clarify, you do enjoy sex with anyone. It's not
Oh
a
yes, yes, I am pansexual. I'm.
right. So it wasn't that you didn't. It wasn't that you wouldn't have enjoyed it or anything like that. Like I
Yeah,
know friends. I have friends who are gay who they slept with a woman and they're like, oh, that was not for me. But
yeah, yeah. I didn't. It's not that I didn't enjoy it because of her. It was. I think the reason was because I was just like, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I don't think. I think it could have been a lot better, and it did get a lot better, as the relationship went on. But at the time, I was just like, "That's what all that's what all the big fuss is about." I didn't get it. Whatever. Um, so it kind of reiterated that the idea of that was one of the easy things for me to deal with as far as keeping it at bay for my religion, religious reasons. But I do, if I could have got, it's just kind of like my transition. If I would have started earlier, who knows how damn good I would be right now, Um, it's kind of an inside joke, but and not with you though. That's the stupid thing is I'm doing inside jokes inside my own little head. But yeah, if they ever watch it, then they'll get it. They'll be laughing in there.
as
So.
long as you make yourself laugh, that's the most important thing.
Yeah, exactly. And if they, like I said, if they ever watch it, they'll be laughing along with me too. But yeah. So yeah, it's I don't know. I just never found myself to be um, struggling with it as much as some people do, and I understand it. I know there are struggles like that. I know that there are people who are overly sexually driven, and probably would struggle with that as much as I did with my transition. I figured that my transition was my burden to bear as far as my walk with Christ went, and other people may have sexual addiction or struggling with keeping their virginity or any other things along the sexual line that go along with that as well. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Welcome Xbox and welcome Deirdre. And
Hey,
I'm gonna go ahead and get a couple more people in here, and I'll put the link out for others who want to join.
awesome. Good to see you again, Jennifer. It's been a while.
Ditto, hun. How have you been?
Good, good.
Good. Glad to hear. Does your lower third say Solip 6 box?
Oh yeah, yeah. Xbox was my name, but on my
Yeah.
epistemology, I go into solipsism a little bit.
Oh, okay. That's
Jennifer,
good.
I saw that you're the triple threat heathen.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
What are the three threats that you offer that you bring to the table?
Okay, so to most Christians, obviously being trans is one of them. The fact that they would still consider me a male and that I'm married to a male would be another one, and the fact that I'm an atheist as well. So,
What was your experience with the military and with not only, I guess, your husband, but also your own experience as you were in the military as if I remember the timeline correctly, as a Christian,
yeah,
and you hadn't transitioned yet.
yeah. I was 17 to 21 was when I was in the military. Well, maybe just yeah, just about to turn 22. I think it was. Yeah, I screwed that up earlier in the conversation. I said I just turned 21, but I actually was just about to turn 22 when I got out of the military. Um, so I went in the day before my 17th birthday, and I got out a day before my 22nd birthday. Um, so bump everything up from 21. 6 months later, met the girl. It would actually be 22. Bumped it up 6 months later, met the girl, and 24 got out of the religion. So. Um, but yeah, anyway, yeah, I was former military myself in the Marine Corps for 4 years, and then jump ahead 10 years later, um, married someone in the Navy. So
You know, I want to get into it at some point because it's around the ages that I started actually changing religion-wise. I want to get into like the neurology of it, or the brain part of it, where your prefrontal cortex and your frontal lobes actually finally develop to the extent that they're going to for the rest of your life. And that's forethought and decision making and things like that. And they don't stop developing until around 24, 25 in a lot of people. That gives you the ability, you know, see around corners, see what the long-term reactions of your decisions.
yeah, so maybe it was good that I deconverted just before finishing up with that. I might have been stuck with that forever. God, that would have been horrible.
I agree.
No offense to any theists in here.
You're stuck, Spackle. Sorry.
Yeah, Kevin and Spackle, Spackle? I want you to just keep it clean in here. I know you're.
Hey, I when I use four-letter words, it's for a purpose, and it's usually not for abuse.
Calm down.
Did you guys have anything you wanted to offer before I start jibber jabbering some more?
Nothing so far. I caught most of it, so yeah, nothing so far.
Oh, thanks for joining then.
I can leave.
I have a question for Jennifer, if that's all right.
Ask away.
Since you were pursuing clergy at one point and some seminary and stuff like that, did you ever talk to other Christians about what you were going through as far as gender identity goes, or was that something that was just way too scary to touch? And then if you did, what were the reactions that you got?
Yeah, I was way too afraid to man, I didn't know I was gonna get kicked out for asking questions that I did. But yeah, my fear is that I was gonna get kicked out if I were to even bring that up. Like that was there's back then there was a big kind of a stigma associated with being in the LGBT community because if you've ever listened to Tommy Hall, he's not the only one that voices the opinion that gays are child molesters, atheists are child molesters, blah 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 blah. It's quite a common thing, and to be in that kind of a position where you just kind of, I don't want to say out myself as a child molester because I absolutely am not one, but the idea that if I were to at the very least tell them I was a cross-dresser, let alone wanted to transition, I think they would have, in my mind, they probably would have flipped out and said, like, no, we can't, we don't need to cut this one off at the pass. We don't need any more people who molesting.
Liability
Yeah.
in their eyes, right? A liability in their eyes.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
You get shoved off in categories of like of derogatory categories automatically.
yeah, and I just didn't want to. That was something. Man, I didn't even share that with very many people. Like when I was about 16, I shared it with my brother's wife at the time, who ended up becoming my best friend. So even she freaked out when I told her. So you learn at a young age when you take that step out into the water that even if your first initial reaction is that the water's cold, you don't imagine that it's ever going to warm up when you get deeper in, or that you're ever going to get used to it or anything like that. You just expect that initial reaction that you got from a person you trusted is going to be 10 times as worse from someone that doesn't even know you, or that you're not even familiar with as far as who they are as a person. So yeah, that was just something I didn't really talk about too much to other people.
Do you think that it relates to what a lot of fights end up coming down to, or disruptions come down to, is violating someone's expectations of you? Like they have preconceived expectations of people and things, and when you bring something up like that, they maybe feel violated in that.
Yeah, it's kind of like Bert and I were talking about stereotypes earlier. Um, and while some of them, do pertain to some people, that's where they're derived from. You can't assume that about everyone. You can't assume all Asians are bad drivers. Even though some Asians are bad drivers. I know some white people that are bad drivers too. So, yeah, but the stereotype happens to be Asians are bad drivers, not white people are bad drivers. So, but you know, I would never go to, I'd never meet a new person who's Asian and say, so, you must be a bad driver, huh? I would never assume that about them, and I don't, I don't feel that other people necessarily abide by that. They probably have, their preconceived notions based off of stereotypes that may or may not be true, and they'll take it and run with it rather than asking a person or getting to know the person and who they actually are as a person. So.
Yep, I've met a few, well, more than a few on here, like the one you said, and but there's more than you would think with all of that kind of thinking.
Definitely more than you'd hope to.
Yeah, definitely.
Can you talk a little bit about that experience of telling your brother's wife and what that felt like for you and what her response felt like for you?
Yeah. Okay. So I'll go over the story first. Because it'll probably lend some credence to why she reacted the way she did when I tell you the approach that I took and how awful the approach was. It's kind of because I don't want to make her look bad. I don't want to be like, oh yeah, I'm going to confide in you with this, and then she just freaking flips out, because it was totally not like that. So we lived in a house. It was a very large house that was kind of divided up into sections and like little apartments, and it was kind of like a family house, but we all had our own little apartments. Like my mom had her own apartment downstairs. My brother and his wife had their little apartment. My uncle had his little apartment. My aunt had her section of the house, and then I was upstairs, and I had two bedrooms up there for myself. So one night, I was dressed, looking pretty cute, if I do say so myself. So, so I'm up there, just chilling, doing my thing, and that's pretty much most of the time. I was doing it by myself. I did have one friend that that I found through the magic of the internet, which was a very new thing at the time. and I met them through an old website called Grex. I don't know if anyone has ever heard of it. It's really old and outdated now, but back then it was the cool thing. So one person, a stranger, knew about it before she did. But anyway, so I'm upstairs doing my thing. She comes upstairs and knocks on the door, and so I asked who is it, and I found out it was her, and so I'm like, okay, I've got a choice here. I can either quickly get undressed, take off all my makeup, try to hide all this crap in an amount of time where she's not going to be like, what the hell are you doing in there? Or I can just be like, suck it up and just be like, here's who I am, And I was like, okay, I'm going to just screw it. I'm going to just be like, open up the door and be like, here's who I am. And so I opened up the door, and so the original reason why she came up was to give me an old sweater she had, an REM sweater, because I was really big into band shirts back then. So she's like, I got an old REM shirt, here you go. That's what she originally came up there to do, and instead she pretty much just came and gave me a look, and was like, yeah, here's that sweater I told you I was going to give you. And then she went down and she caught, like, the first thing, like I said, we're best friends now. So, later she told me the story of what she actually went downstairs and did. She's like, yeah, the first thing I did is call up her. She's like, I called up my friend who's gay and asked him what the hell was going on. So, yeah, that's that story.
Did you find a lot of power in just, no matter what the person's reaction was, but actually admitting it out loud and putting it out there?
Yeah, like I said, I had one stranger who knew that happened to live in the same city, which was very strange for me because, like I said, it was a very small city that I grew up in, population of about 3,000 at the time. It's up to 10,000 now, so it's growing. Woohoo! But
still only one African American though.
we got a Walmart now, and we've got a Myers too. If you know what a Myers is, back up in Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, it's small town, so it's weird to have that one person that even though they were a stranger and I didn't really know them too well, other than chatting online, it was kind of nice to kind of have someone that I could kind of relate to. But yeah, it was kind of. It was kind of like the one person down, 100 more to go kind of feeling. Like it was a small victory, but it was like the first step of, like, if you're gonna do this, you're gonna have to come out eventually, and that's one less person to have to do it to now. So in that sense, yeah, it was kind of a weight off my shoulder. But then it was like, oh my God, I hope she doesn't tell my brother. Oh my God, I hope she doesn't tell my mom. Oh my God, our whole family lives in this house. So I'm sitting up there like, what damage is she doing right now? Like, is she telling everyone? Is everyone going to know? And she ended up telling my brother, and my brother got pissed off. And, the story goes, eventually they came up and raided my room and, found all my clothes and makeup and some other odds and ends stuffs in there that they did not approve of at the time. And, confronted me with it, so that was kind of traumatic. To kind of, I felt a bit violated in the sense of my privacy. Even as a child, you think that you deserve privacy, and I agree. You should have some degree of privacy. And the assumptions that were made by them when they when they found my stash, I guess, if you want to call it that. The assumptions they made of why I had that were a bit far-fetched, and I wish they would have just asked me of what was going on, because that's what I really wanted. I wanted someone to ask me what I was going through.
Right.
It wasn't until I started. So remember the I'm gonna call her a girl, because I don't know if she finished transitioning or not, but I will call the person I knew that dressed a female. So when I refer to her, so yeah, that person I knew that lived in my city, we had agreed to finally meet up, and I was like, okay, so I'm gonna dress and look pretty and go over, and she's gonna be dressed and look pretty, and we're gonna be like, hey, this is us, finally meet up for the first time. So she gave me her address, and I was like, okay, I need to find a way to get over there. It's freaking Michigan, and it's freezing as cold. So I'm gonna borrow my aunt's car without her asking, because obviously, I was 15 at the time. I wasn't gonna, be uh, given permission to use a car when I didn't have a license. But so I took the car. I ended up getting pulled over by a state trooper. Hauled off to jail. My aunt actually wanted to press charges against me, but the prosecuting attorney wouldn't do it. They lowered the charges to misdemeanor joyriding. I got probation, suspension of my license, which I didn't even have, but I was prolonged in getting my license when I actually got it. And also I had to go to counseling. And that was like the most awesome thing. I was like, okay, I'm going to go to counseling. A psychiatrist or a psychologist is going to know what the hell is going on with me. This is going to be freaking awesome. And it's court ordered, so I don't have to tell anyone what's going on. With me, as far as I can just tell him, and he's going to be he's going to be able to tell me what the hell's going on, how I fix it, what the deal is. Yeah, so I go through that, and he just put me down as like, typical cross-dresser, nothing going on here. Yeah, there's part of me that just wants to go back to that town and like knock on his freaking door and be like, yeah, you fucked up. You could have like saved me the trouble of waiting and told me exactly what it was, But instead, all he did was, reported it back to the courts. Because obviously, the cop pulled me over when I was, fully done up, and so the cop was freaked out, like, what the hell is this? Transsexual in that tiny little town, or cross-dresser in that tiny little town is probably not a very common thing. But yeah, so that's why I was court ordered, because of the cross-dressing. But yeah, I didn't find out until I joined the military, when they try to tell you, they're like, okay, whatever you do, don't tell them you've ever been to a psychiatrist or a psychologist, or you never had therapy. If you want to get into the military, you won't say a word. Well, I'm kind of one of those people that I feel like I have to tell the truth. So when they asked if anyone here has ever been in therapy, I raised my hand. Stupid me. They pulled me out in the room. They're like, okay, so what was the name of the doctor? And I was like, it's Dr. So-and-so. And so they pulled up files, and they're like, oh, it's just cross-dressing, whatever, you're good to go. And that's how I found out that that's what he diagnosed me as. Oh, typical cross-dresser, cross-dressing tendencies, da-da-da-da. So it was,
Yeah, it just seems like they're blowing you off, kind of thing.
Yeah, it like, he so could have like saved me years of testosterone just riddling my body with this god awful body hair and fucking broad shoulders. I mean, at 15 years old, that, like, hormones haven't really done that done too much to me. And he could have had me started off on the right path. I don't know, if he would have just told me that this is like, all I needed was that reassurance of, like, this is a normal thing. It happens. Here's what you can do. I probably still would have struggled with it religiously, but I don't think I would have struggled with it as much if I knew what the hell was going on. I think it would have like saved me so much trouble.
Therapists must just have a totally different view of the world than everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure.
Yeah,
I wanted to say welcome to Clarky Clark and Helena and Lali. Welcome.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, don't let I guess me and Bert are asking all the questions. Don't let me run the show.
Yeah.
So I've got a question.
Absolutely.
Really? How unusual.
We're in a situation. It's the time period is now. There's a kid who's very savvy, up on things. They understand what's going on with them. They have religious parents, and there's a real serious problem with in all of the ways that you can imagine. Including like going onto the Facebook of the child and saying,
Helena,
yeah, what?
is that your dog growling?
Yeah. No, it's me.
There's a wolf pack in there.
You're gonna eat
It was
something,
distracting. It was distracting from what you were saying.
All I can do is mute or just talk through the growl.
Just keep talking. Just keep going.
Yeah, you're good. You're good.
Anyway, to the point of like the invasion of privacy and everything, and I'm wondering, any advice for any of the parties involved?
Yeah, so I had mentioned, I'm not sure if this is related. I somehow remember talking to you about this, Helena, before, but and so I apologize for speaking first, but I was going to bring this up earlier, was that we had this isn't going to help you at all, Helena. I'm sorry. We had a situation where we had a child who the parents realized actually that they were trans and let the school know that the child was going to be coming back from the summer break. This is in elementary school. The child's going to be coming back and it's going to be a female, and appreciated the school's help. And the school actually was completely understanding and accommodating. But the church that the parents went to a church in the area, did not deal with it well. And they actually reached out through other friends to us because they knew that we had friends who were gay married friends in a church, a local church, who did find their church to be much more open, and so they were interested in their child going. But I realized actually as I started to interrupt with this story that this in no way helps your situation at all.
Well, I mean,
I have a question.
It's never easy, but at least if the parents already are on board, it's a little easier.
Right.
The problem is when everyone's on board but them.
I have a question, because I've noticed that there is some division on Christians on their take on sexuality. That there are Christians that are okay with transsexuals, and there are Christians that are okay with homosexuals, but sometimes they're not okay with one or the other. And so does this person fall under both categories, one category?
Probably both, but that's a guess.
Okay. I'm noticing that there are some Christians that don't have a problem with gender identity. They actually think that that's okay because like it's not really spoken particularly about in the Bible. But then they have a problem with actual same-sex relations, if that makes sense. I mean, I'm just saying like sometimes there's a division there. Other times they put it in the same pile, and so I was just curious. You wouldn't know if the parents were in that spectrum, huh?
Yeah, I think they probably put them in the same pile. I don't have definitive proof, but there's little bits of evidence here and there.
Jennifer, did you have a take on that? Like how you would react?
What should we? How can we best help this kid?
Well, I would say, I could say take him to a therapist, but obviously my experiences with that aren't always great. But, but yeah.
And the parents won't allow it, right? So.
Yeah, that's kind of why I was like, saying the whole point of mine being court ordered was like a godsend to me because, like, it wasn't, my parents didn't have to pay for it because, we didn't make enough money, and it was just kind of, it's kind of done, I guess, through some kind of, I don't want to say welfare, but some kind of assistance, therapy assistance program, I guess, is a sliding scale type thing, where my fee was 0. So, but yeah, it's.
Unfortunately, there are therapists like that, right? Like that, but
Yeah.
but a lot of times they'll pass you off to someone that can help, and I think therapists have come a long way too, from what you're saying. Like,
Yeah, and
I go to
there are
psych.
ones that specialize in this stuff too, and that's probably the first step, is to find one that specializes in gender identity issues, and then find a way to get this child to them. But it's, I mean, the big hurdle is having the parents understand that this is it's as much a biological thing as it is a you know, it's the incongruity in the biological sense, and then it's kind of uh, it kind of shows itself in the adherence to certain societal, um, I guess, ways that we function. Like, Bert and I were talking earlier about, dress and how important it is to someone to fit these societal roles of the gender that you feel like you should be. And, it's so there's the adherence to that can do so much for someone's mental, capacity in this sense. But yeah, as far as getting the parents on board with that, it's kind of just the information to have them understand that this is a biological thing. These kind of things happen. As just as I'm not comparing the two, but just as there are things like Down syndrome and autism, and just as these things happen, it's kind of on the same board as, like, these are things that just happen. This is on the spectrum of how things go with the human. It's the human condition of whatever happens to be that person's kind of. To me, when I was a Christian, it was a burden, but it's just kind of one of those things that you deal with, and if the sooner they come to that conclusion that it's a biological thing that needs to be addressed, then you can work from there. Hopefully, having the parents on board with getting the child to a therapist as early as possible, so they can live a more, I guess, a more a life that's more accepted by people around them, because the more hormones kind of take over your body and add more masculine features, the harder it is to reverse. So the earlier the transition, the better. The easier it's going to be for them to kind of blend into society later. So
I think it seems like it's gonna have to be, if the parents are not on board with this, that's gonna have to be the child doing things like, when they get into high school, seeking out the gay and straight or gay straight alliance, or the various groups that would be available to them, or seeking out other individuals who have come out and have accepting parents, or just trying to create, to some degree, unbeknownst to the parents. Because if
That
you've
was my suggestion, for sure, to find the LGBT ally like clubs or groups in town. I know that sometimes there's like clubhouse type things.
yeah, as far as starting transition, though, you need a therapist for that, and
That's true.
unfortunately,
Yeah, I wasn't considering that part.
Yeah, unfortunately for that, if you're under the age of 18, it's usually 18. You have to have a parent's permission to be admitted into
Right.
a therapy session. So,
Well, are the parents open for to therapy, for them to be involved in the therapy? Like I guess the kid would still need a separate private therapy, but a more family type therapy as well with it.
I would be careful with that. Like if they're what I think they are, they're gonna say,
they're
we'll send you to therapy. We'll send you to reparative therapy. They'll go the other direction.
or it will be a yeah, it'll be at the bare minimum, it would probably be a Christian therapist who is going to tell the child to pray, you know, trust in God that, you know, God has a plan, and, you know, you can't fall to the, you know, to Satan's will, and da 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 da.
Wow.
You know, been there, done that.
Jeez, I can't. Yeah, that's terrible.
Because while I didn't come out, and I'm sure there are probably some people that kind of figured it out, but, you know, I did pick up on, you know, people who ask questions about gays and lesbians, and, you know, that was their response to them. You know, well, they just need to hold fast to God's will and not fall into, you know, to Satan's game, and da 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 da. And I imagine it would be the same thing if the parents picked the therapist.
Yeah, just will it away. That's kind of all you're saying.
Mm. You know, actually, a lot of people don't go to will it away anymore. They're giving it up. They're just saying, you know, bear it as a burden.
Oh, damn. I was gonna tell Helena one last thing.
So be
Well,
listening.
maybe she can catch it afterwards. But yeah, my if push comes to shove, if this child is absolutely sure that this is something that they absolutely want, and they want to take this drastic measure, there are options of finding kind of, I don't want to say disowning your parents, but like getting it's kind of like getting a divorce from your parents.
Emancipated.
Yes, thank you, Clarky. Very much appreciate that. I search for words and I can't. But yeah, you can get emancipated from your parents if you feel that your physical health or anything like that is in jeopardy, and this may be something that would fall under that category. Unfortunately, you'd probably be awarded or be put as a ward of the state, which isn't going to be that great of a thing as far as, you know, flopping around from foster parent to foster parent. Always a possibility when you're, you know, 14, 15 years old, however old at the time. But if you have a family member, yeah, if you have a family member who is kind of on board, you know, possibly maybe suggesting that they foster them, possibly. It's a tough situation, though. It's very, very tough.
I think
4 years, though. That's 4 years, right?
Yeah,
like
that's
That could be, you know.
That's a lot of hormonal transition, though, and that's a lot of body hair that'll have to be
exactly.
electrolyzed later on.
No, no, I have a question though. Like,
No, I didn't start until 24, so.
Well, I have a question then. So, like,
Bigger pain in the butt.
Yeah, it is.
I understand attraction happens younger, right? But is it possible to be confused and not know what you want as a teen? Because teens are always so confused in general. Like,
No, that's what we took out a little bit earlier.
is it safe to start a transition before you're 18?
Well, it's the thing is that it's not. You're not actually starting your transition. You're just delaying puberty.
Right.
You'll delay puberty until you're 18, and then you'll start transition.
Yeah, and I think it's less about what we want, what someone wants. I'm talking as if I am transgender. I'm actually not, but what someone wants as to what they are.
Yeah, but it's again, it's very hard for someone, and I'm not saying it's impossible. There are people out there that know exactly who they are at that age, but, you know, this is the teenage years are.
I was agreeing with. I was taking a small issue with the idea of it being something that someone decided that they wanted.
Yeah.
Versus something that they realized that they were. That's
right.
all.
Well, I take the issue that in teen years, sometimes you don't know what you are versus what you want.
Yeah,
that's true.
Oh, that's what I was trying to say with the brain thing earlier. Is around that age, around I think it's 12 to 15 or so, you actually dip off in intelligence, right? Like you get dumber, I want to say, and then you get smarter. So your decisions change, right? Who you are isn't going to change, but what you think you want will usually change, right? But that's why that you don't transition that early. But you can start things that are not necessarily irreversible.
Yeah, if you start, if you're put on like testosterone blockers, at a young age, it stops body hair from growing. It stops, muscle growth from starting, which can, be a pain in the ass to get rid of as well. I still have these huge ass shoulders that haunt me. The the body hair is a big one. The voice is another one. If you can catch it before then, before the voice box, widens out and gets, you start having that, deeper voice and everything. Hell, for me, I started losing my hair when I was in high school. That was like really traumatic for me. Um, my hairline started to recede when I was 16, and I was freaking the hell out.
Mm.
If I was on hormones, the quote-unquote male pattern baldness kind of goes away, because the testosterone isn't affecting your hair growth and everything. So, yeah, these are all things that are just kind of put on hold and the back burner until the person is stupidly at an age of consent to make decisions for themselves. But yeah, I think that the numbers are kind of arbitrary in their own sense. They, as far as like taking each individual on an individual basis, I think the number could change person to person, but yeah, it's usually 18 when they can make their own decisions as far as whether they want to keep taking testosterone blockers and start on estrogen to develop the female characteristics, or stop taking the testosterone and do as they wish, living as a male, I guess. So.
If you were a teen then, and you were 14 years old, you have 4 years till you're 18. Let's assume that this teen loves their parents, so they don't want to divorce their parents. Maybe there's some sort of connection there. Let's just assume that. And let's assume that they wouldn't be down with the therapy that you're recommending. What would you then tell that teen?
Well, it really depends on if he. The thing is that there are, again, like I was telling Bert earlier, I don't condone this, but if a person feels that they are pushed to a point where they have no other alternative, there are ways to acquire testosterone blockers without the aid of a therapist. So it's, like I said, I wouldn't recommend it, but if it's a last resort and you feel like this is absolutely something that that this person needs to do, then it is an option. The best thing though is, here's the thing. As a parent, my feelings are, if I had a child who I knew could probably get these pills to block their testosterone, and this is not, this isn't just like, oh well, these are vitamin C pills or anything like that. These are some hardcore kind of affect your life kind of drugs that they'll be taking. I would rather have my child come to me than to put themselves at risk, because I would want them, when you're on hormones, testosterone blockers and estrogen, you are normally, if you go through a therapist, through an endocrinologist, you're monitored your levels are monitored to make sure that they're safe. So that's why I suggest doing it through a therapist first and foremost. But if you're left, to with no other option, I would say, just be careful of, to do your research on it. Know your levels. Don't take too much, to try not to harm yourself and with the ill effects of it. But do what you need to do. You only get one life, and if you know for a fact that this is how you want to live it, then I say go for it. Do it. By all means.
Yeah, it seems like it's a lot, right? Like as we just talk about it, it just seems like a lot, and I can just imagine what it would like to be to go through that and have to make these kind of decisions and think about that. I mean, it's a lot. I don't.
Yeah.
It would be hard to do it on your own, kind of thing.
Yeah, especially to be put in the predicament to make that decision at such a young age. Like, it's
Well,
just it's very
I've
difficult.
heard that hormones can go wrong, right? Like I've heard that there's some effects that people don't sometimes realize, or if they take too much, and I think it'd be kind of scary to just wing it, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, that's why, it's best to get monitored. There are, um, the spironolactone is used for, I believe, is used for high blood pressure, I believe, as well. So, taking too much of it can actually, drop your blood pressure lower than it should be. So you really got to be careful about, your dosages for your weight and for your body type, how your body reacts to it, and that's like I said, that's why I recommend absolutely getting monitored, staying monitored, so that way your levels are within the norms, and that your blood pressure stays normal, and you don't dip too low there. So yeah, when I first started self-medicating, um, I actually took too much, and I would, get dizzy, pass out. Um,
Mm.
some people say that was the cause of some of my, I don't know if you call them seizures, or uh, they were kind of like seizures. I would just one time when I was in the military, I blamed it on caffeine pills, but yeah, I was apparently I was going to make a copy, and next thing I know, I was waking up on the floor, and they were like, "Dude, you were just like flapping around like a fish," and I was like, "Okay." So yeah, I mean, there can be, obviously, um, I'm not gonna that moment when I was self-medicating and learned I was flopping around like a fish is what got me to stop and kind of go back to being the good little Christian person that I should be.
Right.
There are times um, when I've delved into, transitioning more than I wanted to, religiously, and I don't really count that as my transition, because I didn't know what the hell I was doing, and so yeah, I would. I'm getting long-winded here, but
I don't know.
try to get monitored at the very least. But if not, then just do some research on it, and do the best you can.
Yeah, that's a lot, and it seems like if you add any religion on top of it, it's just another layer of making it harder to even understand what's going on and how to act, and it influences your decisions so much that all this is it's tough, right?
I do, just maybe this is a slight off of that vector. I do feel a little, I empathize with my friends who are gay and Christian and have a desire when they come out to maintain their religious faith that they've had. It's a really hard position to be in because not a lot of churches are obviously accommodating or friendly or have the interpretation which lends itself to them being welcome there. So while I myself don't understand how they can reconcile certain notions found within Scripture, which I myself is why I'm not a Christian anymore. I can't reconcile those things anymore. But they've straddled the line I can't quite understand, but I empathize with that kind of that situation that they're in. It's really tough.
Yeah, there's Episcopalians, for instance, largely will accept you, but
They just got in trouble, right, with
Anglicans,
the
yeah, the
Anglican Church,
High
yeah.
Anglican Church said, you're suspended for now because of that. Yeah. The other option is the option that Baldy and I go, which is, hey, we have same-sex attraction and we don't get into it, and we just deny that. Like we say, yes, this is a thing, this is real. We accept that this is part of what we are, but we just don't feed into that. That's another option too, which is really horrific to a lot of people too. But that's another option in Christianity, and unfortunately, even with that option, you are still treated badly by the Tommy Halls. You are still treated badly by the hillbillies because you still represent something that they like to believe doesn't exist.
And are so confused about it. How do you? This is a little off, but how do you change what you believe like that though? Like, I know not all Christians believe the same thing, but if you just because these ones accept you, why would you jump to just believing what they believe and going to that seems like it'd be a tough decision as well to change your belief like that just to have you accepted kind of thing.
For the individuals I've spoken to, it's not they themselves have become persuaded that their homosexuality must be okay, that however they are, whatever their orientation is, that they I don't want to confuse this with the gender issue we were talking about earlier. This is specifically about orientation, but they've become persuaded that all the years that they prayed, that they were off, that they prayed to have their orientation changed or their disposition changed, that they were off, that was actually not God's will, and they become persuaded that they take on an interpretation of Scripture that allows for them to have no weight on their conscience regarding their sexuality or their orientation. So they're actually
Sorry. There are so many people's interpretations that I don't see why that one should be any less valid than anybody else's.
Right. I think it's that they become persuaded. They believed when they started that they were in the wrong, and eventually they realized through a process of it not changing for them that they must be wrong about God's will for them.
Yeah, they must be wrong about being wrong.
Right.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yeah, sorry, I had to step away for a bit. I don't know if I mentioned this, but the testosterone blocker I'm on is also a potassium-sparing diuretic, so I cannot eat a lot of potassium. Or else
so you pee all the time.
And I also pee all the time, yes.
Yeah.
I was holding it for about...
That must be my problem.
Literally, like 5 minutes after I started talking to Bert on air, I was like, oh, crap, are you kidding me? So I've been holding it for like the last 2 hours, and I'm like, oh, gotta go.
Not literally, oh crap.
Well, no, not oh crap. It was
impressive control.
Yes, I definitely do my Kegel exercises. So.
As do I. I'm doing them right now, in fact.
Hey, Bert, have you broadcasted everybody? Just checking.
Have you read the side chat? I don't know if you have.
I'm delusional, so maybe I missed something.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, so I don't know. There was something I wanted to say, but I didn't want to interrupt, and I had to go. I really had to go, and now I forgot. But oh well, never mind.
Yeah, I think on the topic of praying the gay away, or the I think for some people it becomes a breaking point, but and certainly I empathize with those people, where they leave the faith altogether. But for some that want to keep it and maintain it, that's a tough spot to be in. That's a really hard. It's hard um, when you can no longer have all of the things you'd like to have, right?
That kind of ties in with where I was most interested in the conversation, is just the idea of feeling that there's something wrong with you, the dysphoria, the general feeling of not fitting in your body, not being right. And I think that it's much more pervasive than we think, and it's kind of, some people can identify exactly what it is about themselves that is, quote, wrong. The gender issue is a case in point there. But I don't exactly know where I was taking that, but I can relate on a lot of levels to that feeling,
Right.
and knowing that something is wrong. But I don't know. I'm almost jealous that there was an identifiable "this is what is wrong."
Right. No,
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
Did you want to talk about that Xbox a little bit? I had something else to say on that, but
Oh yeah, I can a little bit, because if people aren't understanding exactly what she's saying, is
yeah,
there is a feeling of, even I've had it almost as far as I can remember, of just something being off, right? And I'm not attracted to the opposite sex or anything, or to the same sex. I'm attracted to the opposite sex, but
Was that a Freudian slip there?
yeah. Yeah, no, yeah, because I do kind of border on that line, right? Like, I do find guys attractive and things like that, but not to a sexual extent. But
Right.
something does feel off, and there is no this to it. I can't put my finger on what it is. Where with like Jennifer here, she can identify what is off, at least to some extent, more than what we're saying.
Yeah, it's interesting that yeah, it ran an interestingly parallel track up until the point of you actually figuring out of the what was the issue. It's like, okay, so I know something's wrong, and now I'm hitting puberty, and now this is making it really, really, really wrong. So the route I took was to stop eating, and that was sort of a puberty stopper. But I mean, it's just like, okay, this body is wrong. So what do we do about it? Of course, that's not really the best strategy, but I don't know. It's an interesting dilemma. So I don't know.
No, I'll put it out there. There was a time that I wondered if I was the wrong gender, right? Like, had that feeling, and because I couldn't put my finger on what it was, it ended up not being that, obviously, but I still don't. I still had the feeling. I still don't know what it is. But.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna, not along that line. I was actually gonna say regarding the issue of, I don't think it's. I mean, in terms of faith and walking away from it, I feel like for myself, I had those. I came to the similar point. It was just, it wasn't about my orientation. It was about other things that were leaving me with this feeling like it wasn't, didn't satisfy certain things I needed it to satisfy in order for me to continue with it. It was I had to come to a kind of a tipping point where I finally said, you know what, there's enough stuff that I can't make sense of, that this can't be the case. Mm-hmm. And had to kind of, like, for me it was traumatic. Like, it was like and I know in no way want to compare it to what Jennifer or others go through, because I think that's a very different, that's a core identity issue. And I think that suppressing that and rejecting that and the self-hate is completely different than anything else that I've experienced. But in terms of my own faith and having my life built around it, and my wife and my kids all having Christian names, and having going to church every week with them, and finally coming to the point where I said, all right, I'm going to go down a path because I'm starting to question this stuff. Being willing to kind of go down that path, and coming to that point where it no longer sits. It's really tough. It's really hard. I didn't want to, as I said in many Hangouts now, I didn't want to leave it. I didn't have any issues that were, it just didn't make sense to me anymore. It didn't resonate with what I thought was the case anymore. So
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit on the Hangout, me and you did, where I just kind of tore everything down and had to start over and build up what I could. And I had to tear down everything I had believed in and thought about, and had to get to a point where I had to actually analyze, what do I actually believe? What actually makes sense here?
Yeah,
I
I think
hope.
the scary. Go ahead.
So I'm sorry. I wanted to say actually just I really hope that that didn't come off like I was trying to make a direct comparison or equate my
No,
own
no,
things with yours,
I didn't think
because
that.
I just was trying to relate. That's all.
Yeah, and then that's exactly how I took it. I didn't take it as, oh, I've got it easy because you have your own issues and blah 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 blah.
Right.
I would
Didn't take it that
never
way at all.
think. I would never say that. Yeah.
I didn't take it that way at all.
Great.
But I think one of the that was one of the scariest things for me when I finally, like, it, that aha moment that I was just like, yeah, it's been slowly slipping out of my hands, but like the moment it, like, where you can't feel it anymore, like it's completely, your faith is just completely gone, and you cannot no longer grasp on anything.
Mm-hmm.
And starting to realize that, I've spent so much time, I think, what was it? It would have been 16 years, believing in this deity, um, and now I don't have anything, and it came to the point where I was like, wow, I wasted 16 years of this only life that I get, believing that there was an afterlife, and granted that I thought I was going to hell, I still thought there was more to it, and I feel kind of like it scared me that I was like, wow, if I'm that gullible, and again, nothing against the theist in here, but this is how I felt to myself. I'm like, wow, if I'm that gullible to where I could have been caught up for 16 years and wasted that much time of my life on that, like, what else am I wasting my life on with other smaller, tedious stuff that isn't even that big, like all these little things that add up, that consume my life, that really don't matter. And so it became this kind of point of going in my head of like trying to figure out what really matters and what the point of life was, and being in limbo like that of not having a quote unquote purpose for my life was really, really freaking, it freaked me out.
No, exactly. I agree.
Maybe bridging the gap though between you and the theist, Spackle, is the honesty that you have, right? Like, I think it's about being very honest about your positions and being open with other people about that. I feel like that's a very liberating thing, regardless of where you are in it. I actually find, and that is actually something I find quite refreshing about Deirdre, is your honesty and your openness about that stuff is what all that matters to me. It doesn't matter what your positions are. It's that you're. I think that's a much richer life to live when you're not putting on airs, or you're not. When you can just be honest about your doubts and about your issues and about who you are and all of that stuff.
Absolutely.
It's liberating, right? If I try to prop myself up to be somebody that I'm not, right, and I spend all this energy in being something that I cannot be or I am not, I mean, it just imprisons you, right? That's a prison. Like, that's not life.
Yeah, I think that's right there. Bert hit the nail on the head of why Deidre is in my is in not just my Christian circle, but my other everyday friends kind of circle too. So
Yeah, we've had some good conversation, actually, Jen. Like, you're one of my favorite off-air conversations. We talked for like hours one night, and we had never ever really sat and talked, and it was a really, I walked away like going, that was a really good conversation. Like, just human to human, good conversation.
yeah, and I was telling Bert earlier that I was like I've told this story, and I gave like the kind of the you and I talked for quite a while, and I gave you a lot more details than the our blurb that I kind of gave here, but yeah, that's I don't know. It's nice to see other people's views, like, and to kind of put myself back in that position again, and be like, where was I? When I kind of where you're at now, like what time in my life was I there? And because I listened to you and your beliefs and like Bert was saying, your doubts and your I kind of like, oh yeah, I remember having that one. Yeah, I remember that one coming up in my head. How did I reconcile? Is she going to reconcile the same way? And so I like to listen to Christians for that reason, because I kind of see myself in that as well. So
That was something I definitely got from my Christian experience. Actually, the church I went, I've said this a couple of times, is the church that I went to had a very open, everybody shared their past. It was very open about their lives. And I feel like, I don't know, it goes back to honesty and sincerity. And I think those are the things that are really important. Even my wife and I part of the reason why we were able to go through my becoming an atheist was because she knew everything about me up to that point. So, we had an incredibly open and honest relationship, and we still do today. And that makes it such that there's nothing I can't share with her. There's no desire, there's no fear, no doubt, no nothing that I can share that I can't share with her. And that's a very liberating position to be in. You can be really open about life, and the actual positions you hold matter a little less at that point, because you can have the conversations about them and really work through them and not live in fear. I mean, that's just the horrible part of all that.
No, I think what you're saying is one of the most important things. I completely agree with you. I mean, it is so liberating, and you actually find out more about yourself going through that, and it's nice.
I would agree.
You almost make me wish I had a partner, but not quite.
Well, yeah, it's one thing to have a partner, but it's another thing to have that kind of partner. There's plenty of partners that you can go through that you'll never get that with.
Well, and we went through this. I mean, we went through hell to get to that point too. I mean, it worked through a lot of distrust and dishonesty before we adopted that, and that was through a lot of, like, early on. Probably my marriage was on the rocks a couple of times, not because of infidelity or other things, but just because of not being open and honest and frank. And I think that's true with a lot of marriages. I think that's true with a lot of starting to live with someone and having all of your stuff just exposed and just being okay with that,
Yeah.
What you just said, I think you built a lot of strength in that relationship through it, right? Like I say through mine, we've been open like this whole time. It's actually part of the reason we get married, right? I think what you're saying, you actually have something stronger, right? Because you've been through that. That's nice. Glad to hear that.
It's similar. I feel like it's similar with our kids too. Is I think that when we learned that lesson, then with our kids, it was pretty easy. It was like, okay, we're just going to be. You're never going to get a say so from us. We're going to be really clear about what our reasons are. And we're going to talk. We're going to treat you like we can talk to you about it. We can work through it. You can understand why it is we're saying the things we do. And we have 3 really great kids. It's been really, and I think a lot of that just goes towards honesty and sincerity and openness and just not being worried about what it is that's coming out of your mouth,
Absolutely.
I had a question about your children. I don't know if it's too deep, and you don't have
no,
to.
you can ask anything. It's fine.
What like when you're a Christian, like, okay, so I'm trying to get this straight. Did your wife and yourself deconvert around the same time, or was it like one after the other, or are you?
She did.
She's still
Sorry.
She when we when I deconvert, so it was probably 6 months to a year. It was like 6 months of really battling with it. And it was kind of this very deliberate process of like, look at, I had to say to myself, okay, I'm willing to go down this path of thinking about things and going and starting to ask some of the questions that had piled up for myself and realizing that I couldn't just kind of stash them away anymore. I had to really kind of vet them and that the truth would lead me wherever it was and be willing to kind of go where that was going to go. Um, and I held that back from that's one of the occasions where I didn't tell my wife what I was going through because I really wanted to be sure of where I'd end up before I actually gave any cause for concern or anything. And then it became clear to me I no longer believed this. At some point, I no longer believed it anymore. And I had to find the opportunity to tell her that. And there was actually one night where I was just restless, struggling. My stomach hurt. I'd had nights of terrible sleep, and she was like, "What's going on?" And that's when I told her. And then it was quite a bit after that she deconverted as well. But she admitted that because we had been exposed to a lot of things, we had had conversations all along. As much as I tried to hold it back from her, she herself was having doubts prior to my even revealing that I was having doubts. So I think she was worried. I think her recalling of the situation as she cried about it and was wondering if our marriage was going to survive it. But we proceeded forward from there, and eventually both. I had already deconverted, but I was trying to weigh whether we were going to have a marriage with a kind of someone of faith and someone without, and what was it going to be like. So anyway.
Yeah. Okay. And then the actual question about your children is, did you raise them as Christians, or did they take to the religion, or did they just kind of do their own thing, or?
So my kids were. My oldest was probably 4 or 5 and my youngest was probably 2 or 3 when we deconverted, or when I deconverted. They all were. We always had very open conversations about God, and they were free to believe whatever they wanted to. I was very weary of any time, regardless of the topic, when my kids ask me, what do I think about something, oftentimes I would try to solicit what do you think about it first? And then I'll let you know what I think about it, only because I never wanted to have them just take on my positions, but rather hear them out first and then give them the reasons why I think it's different. So when we had conversations around the dinner table, even my youngest son at points was like, yeah, I think there might be a God, and he was completely open and free to think about that. My son last year said that he wanted to take a religious studies program at school at one of the University of California's branches because he wanted to know more about that stuff and be able to have he was interested in it. So we've always been open, but all three, I believe, today are atheists. I know my daughter is, and I believe both my sons are. They're certainly not Christian or any of the mainstream religions.
All 4 of mine ended up either apatheist or atheist, and none of it was forced because I was Christian mostly through all of it, but they were never immersed in it. Like you said, they were free to accept what they could, question what they needed to, and make their own decision on it. And I still think what I was kind of saying earlier is that making them make a decision when they're that young is a bad move. They can make decisions and change them, but to force them into one and hold them to it, I don't agree with that.
I tried very much to let them be who they wanted to be or who they found themselves being. So, did that answer your question, Jennifer?
Yes, thank you.
I was just thinking, I wonder how my parents would have reacted if I had suddenly become a theist. because I think I mentioned once I grew up the absolute opposite, in a really, really atheist home. And I think I might have been tossed out of the house if I had suddenly gotten religion. Just a thought.
Remind me of that if you go off air and you're still here. I want to ask you something about that.
That's interesting.
No problem.
That's fascinating. So you had atheist parents.
Very much so. They still are. I mean, they are. My dad. I mean, my dad's not as hardline as my mom. My mom is like an ignorant scientismist of the Newtonian sort. She just does not understand me at all. Like it's just because I'm not. I think I mentioned it. I'm not. I lost that, or I shed that illusion. And she just thinks I'm a fucking woohead. She's like, whatever. Of course you are, because you're the fuck up. So no surprise. But my dad's aunt converted to Eastern Orthodox actually several years ago, and tried to become a nun. Didn't quite work out for some reason, but the whole family is atheist, like everyone but her and sort of me. And the way they don't know what to make of her at all. They don't like confront her and try to dissuade her from it, but they're like, what? That does not compute in our logical minds. So it's another side to the whole thing. But it's almost as hardline. Like doesn't make any sense to them, and so that made no sense. But
well, I wonder if they are like on the Christian side, where like, did we do something wrong, right? Did we do something
I'm pretty
wrong?
sure. Yeah. I mean, well, with me, it's a lost cause. So, but with my aunt, I don't even know. Well, I can figure it out. I have theories about her psychology as my unschooled self. I know why she turned to it, but
Clarky Clark, you have I saw that you have a young child. Have you and your I don't know much about I obviously don't know anything about your wife. I take it that you're an atheist. Do you have you guys given consideration, or what's the talk in your household about upbringing and whatnot?
I actually have a very strange situation. I am not married. I have 2 kids by 2 different women, both by one-night stands. My daughter, I got very, very drunk, and the woman kept feeding me alcohol, and then I woke up next to her, and she had a kid. And the reason she later on admitted that she had sex with me so we would have a kid and get married and be a family. That didn't work out so well. But yeah, so I have a daughter from her, and she's very religious. She's Baptist, and at the time I was Catholic. I'm a relatively recent atheist of about 2 or 3 years. I was Catholic. I was what I called myself a bad Catholic. I believed, but I knew I was going to hell, and I hated God. But I still believed, and I still called myself a Catholic, just a really bad one. And actually, becoming an atheist was like the nicest thing for me because it was such a stress relief. But so with my daughter, we actually had a parenting plan that she could raise her in whatever religion she wanted to, but my daughter could participate in any religion of mine. So at the time, she wasn't very religious at all. She's, she was sort of Baptist. Well, as the years have progressed now, and my daughter's mom has actually gotten married, and then she's had another kid, she's become very religious. To the point now where my daughter comes to me and she goes, I know you don't believe in God. How do you know that? I haven't told you that, but sure, okay. So it's difficult because I make a point of not ever talking bad about her mom her mom's beliefs in front of her, then I'll like I want to address something, but I don't want to just say, well, no, you're wrong. So I try and ask her, well, how do we know these things? And my daughter's only 6 years old. So I can't be dropping like, how do you justify that belief? Give me a philosophical definition of your beliefs. I can't do that to her, so I try and do the whole, how do we know things? Like, is there any evidence? Are there any clues? And she can get the whole like detective finding clues thing. So we go that route.
You don't have her build a truth table and then
yeah, no.
Them on it and no.
We'll work on that next year when she's 7.
Like, well, what's your sound deductive argument for that?
Exactly. I'm sorry, your premises just do not compute. Wrong.
Well, so you're in a very interesting and different situation, I'd say.
It's very interesting. So I tiptoe around it. I'm not that concerned because I've always said that I don't really care what she believes as long as she can, when she grows up and she gets older, she can tell me why. If she has reasons why she believes the things she does and it's convincing to her, I'm actually okay with that. I don't care if she's, an atheist, a Catholic, a Baptist, a Muslim. If she's like, hey, Dad, this is what I want to do, this is what I believe because of X, Y, and Z, this convinces me, I'll support her. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think we all hold beliefs. Even us right now, all of us probably hold a belief that we can't justify, right? Like, and we still hold it. I mean, it's part of being human.
Yeah. But in anything, I want to make sure that she's not just, I don't want her to be a Baptist because her mom's a Baptist. And I don't ever want her to say that, hey, Dad, I don't believe in God because you don't believe in God. Right. If that happens, I'm driving her ass to church. We were going there together. We got to get some religion. Yeah. But as long as she grows up and learns to think through the questions and think critically about it, I'm not that concerned. Now, it's going to be an issue with her mom and her family because they are very, very religious. Yeah, very much so. Like, Southern Baptist it's all, everyone's going to hell and hellfire. And
oh, yeah.
Now, my son, though, his mom is not religious at all. I don't even know if she's Christian. I think she's more one of those, sure there's a God, whatever. Maybe. Who knows? Who cares? It doesn't really cross her mind. So she doesn't care.
Right.
And so that's not a problem with her at all, and I have no problem with that at all either. When we were doing the parenting plan together for my son, they asked us about religion. We both kind of looked at each other and just started laughing. We're like, yeah, we don't care. So with him, it's not a problem. It's with my daughter's mom that their side of the family, religion is very important, and every Sunday they have to go to church, and Wednesdays, and they're at church for like 6 hours during the day. It's an all-day event.
You know what I think helped with ours, because even my youngest has been baptized and such, but like I said, they're all either atheist or apatheist or maybe agnostic, right? None of them believe in a God, but is to let them know that it's okay not to question this stuff. It's okay to not believe. It's okay to question and critically think, like you said, and question what's going on, and not just soak it in because someone, as an authority, says so. Your parents or your church or your school, like your teachers, right? Like just authority saying this stuff or believing it. Don't because of that. So I think that helped a lot.
Well, I think every kid has to go through a point where, no matter how they're raised or what environment or culture they're in, you have to go through a point of going, do I own this? Is this what I am? Does this ring true to me? Can I apply this to my daily life? And everybody has to go through that. And if you don't go through that, it means that you're not either taking it very seriously, or you are terrified to ever think about anything. And I'm a theist, so I believe in God. So but I don't think God doesn't want you to question and doesn't want you to wrestle. The whole freaking Old Testament is about people wrestling with God. Israel says, "He who wrestles with God." I I don't see questioning as something that is valued of not happening. I think it happens all the time.
Yeah, and Jennifer and I mentioned this earlier about getting to where you question what you actually believe, not what people around you believe and what you've heard, but what you actually believe, what makes sense to you, and go from there. You get to that point, like you just said, Shai.
Yeah, it's interesting though, kind of wrapping it back to the issue of gender and orientation is when it doesn't have. It's so much easier when it doesn't have a biological identity to it or something like that. Like that's where it gets really tricky, where those core beliefs actually shape developmentally impact you. It's really then the stakes are much higher. Then there's some permanence to your life. It's not merely what you think; it's who you are and how you. Yeah. Anyway, do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's a whole nother layer to add on to that collides
Yeah.
with it, and yeah.
Yeah, I actually had a therapist who said, "Wouldn't it just be easier to be a gay guy?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that would be freaking so much easier. Thank you. Why didn't I think of that? Jeez." It's not about just switching it off like that. It's like Bert said, it's who you are. It's not.
Yeah, it's not necessarily just the attractions and things like that. It's in who you are. It's a different thing.
Can I
As
ask?
as Para said in the chat, he said also that it's a lot to forgive yourself of as well.
Yeah.
It's a whole nother layer of just self shame and guilt and hate and whatnot. I'm sorry, Spackle, go ahead.
Can I ask a douchey question, kind of representative of a common question that gets asked?
No.
No.
It depends on who you're asking.
Douche
No,
away.
it's Jennifer.
If you're asking me douchey questions, I welcome douchey questions. So go
Okay,
ahead.
so here's a douchey question that's been often said. A lot of cisgendered women go, "You'll never be one of us because you will never know what it's like to give birth. You will never know what it's like to have a period, blah, 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 blah." And it's meant to sort of kind of jab a knife and then twist it, and then it's sort of like it does another thing. It sort of like boasts our gender identity, like we have to endure all this stuff, and we're proud of it because we just happen to be born that way. like there's no achievement that's actually made. It's just you kind of end up like I think it's kind of funny to be really proud of your gender because it's not like you chose your gender. It's not like you went, "I fought hard for my gender." It just kind of happens, right? But when
That little
you get,
sperm was swimming, mine swam the fastest.
I'm sure you must have, in all your travels, especially on the internet, I've ran into the people that are like, "You'll never be one of us because you haven't had a period or you haven't," So how do you deal with that as far as, you see yourself as a woman, you think as a woman, but then they're telling you no, they're slapping you down in that particular kind of way. How do you deal with that?
Well, here's the thing: is I think I talked about this a little bit before, but I don't look at myself, and I've been called not trans enough because of this very reason too. I don't look at myself as a woman in that sense. Like I know for a fact I'm never going to be a cisgendered woman, no matter how much surgery I get, no matter how much doctor's intervention can go back into my, even if they could change my frickin' DNA, I'll still never be cisgendered because it's been altered. I was born with male parts. My body did not match my gender. That's the way it's always going to be, no matter what intervention I do to change my appearance on the outside or even on the inside. It's still going to be, my past is still going to be the same. It's not going to change. I will always look at myself as a transgendered woman, or I just said transgender, or a transsexual woman.
Yeah,
I got another.
You experience the world, right? Like your personal experience of it. So
I got another related question then about gender identity and stuff, and I think I have asked you this before. There's been this kind of interesting surge lately, I've noticed, where there's been activists on YouTube and stuff saying, like, if you're bisexual and you are not attracted to transgendered people, then you are a bigot. And I remember I asked you this on an off air, but I'm curious to know how you would address that. Like, do you think that would you make a division between a pansexual and a bisexual, or do you think that you should be pansexual, and if you're not pansexual, then you're a bigot?
No, there are some people who are truly bisexual. They like their men with penises and they like their women without. It's just what they prefer, and when they're interested in these type this gender. Yeah, then there's also pansexuals who include transsexuals and God, words not coming to my head. Those who are genderqueer or agendered or whatever the case may be, they find themselves okay with that too, and then they don't look at that with any oh, that's not my preference. Whereas bisexuals are like, I like men, I like women, I don't like transsexuals. That's fine. That's not a bigoted thing. It's just a preference.
Yes. Spackle, you watch Doctor Who. It'd be Captain Jack.
Oh, I love Captain Jack.
Yep. See, he goes. He's not just he's like that pan. He'll go with aliens even, right? He finds people in whatever.
Yeah, I know what a pansexual is, but there's been a surge to push bisexual sort of in this. You either have to be a pansexual or you're a bigot, which I think is really interesting.
No.
Why can't people just see that it's a spectrum? Why can't, I mean, it seems so obvious that, I mean, I don't know, it's never made sense to me, and I've had this conversation with Jennifer before, I think. Like, it just doesn't make any sense that people don't see that it's totally fluid, that the lines aren't there, just like there aren't lines between species. We make up the lines and the categories and the names for these things, and it's just people is people. Yeah, and I'm not saying that to you, Deidre.
Oh, I know. But another confusing thing what I've run into recently is I've met people that say use the pronoun he, she, right? Okay, but I have a beard. Well, now I'm confused because all the cues that I have in biology says man, beard, man, and so if I say he to somebody that has a beard, right, and then they get mad at me, I'm like, sorry, my cue says beard man, and then I'm like, I don't know what to do because I'm one of those people that there's sort of a panic that we have. Like, I actually don't want to hurt people. I don't aim to hurt people. At the same time, if all our cues say one thing, it's like, well, what do you want me to do? Break all that?
Yeah, and it's kind of hard. I don't understand why it's really good into that.
Well, the problem is, though, is that there has to be a tolerance for those who don't know how you're presenting, right? Like, I think there are some who deliberately aim to disrespect and be an ass about it. I think a lot of people don't. And for a lot of people, it's a matter of habit and of changing how it is they think about things. And on the topic of people not seeing it as a spectrum, Shazbot. I forgot what I was going to say. wanted to say something about that, and I completely forgot.
You just say Shazbot.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I told Mowdy it's the vodka. I was drinking this vodka drink, and everything was fine, and then I got to the bottom of it, and I think all the alcohol was at the bottom. So, so Bert's off. Bert technically is off air right now. So
the whole thing. I mean, I've never really gotten mad at again, it goes back to context with me. Like, if someone mistakenly calls me he, I don't care. It's not going to bother me. But if it's someone like Christian Hillbilly who, purposely calls me he, just to do it, to try to egg me on, I don't need to, I don't put up with that. As far as, like, I'm not going to tell him to stop. I'm just not going to listen to him. I'm just going to be like, no, I'm done with this. I remember I was working I used to work customer service in a family entertainment center kind of place, arcade place, kind of similar to that. But so it was one of those places where you play a game and you get tickets and then you turn the tickets in.
Mhm.
While I'm working the ticket counter, and the cutest little kid just comes up to the counter with mom in hand, and she was like, well, what do you want, and I can't remember what it was I said, but I referred to the little kid as a girl, and it just so happens that it was a boy. I mean, the longest hair, wearing a pink shirt, cute little bejeweled cowboy boots. Like, it was like if freaking someone went nuts with the little bedazzler and just freaking went all over the damn things. So I'm thinking, all the visual cues say little girl. And so I was like, I referred to her as she, I guess. And or his mom, see, I still want to do it because I'm picturing the kid. His mom just went off on me, and I'm like, hey, yeah, yeah, not working here. I get it now. Him, I get it. Him, good, okay. He, him, yes, all right, good, okay. You can shut up now. And she kept going on, and I'm like, look, I get it. I made a mistake. Forgive me. I could have been one of those douchebags that it's like, well, look at your freaking kid. It looks like a freaking little girl. Are you kidding me? But I wasn't gonna, because me of all people, I'm gonna understand. But it's the people that go off the other end on it, they drive me nuts, and I am definitely not one of those people.
Well, and like you said with the first of it, with people like Hillbilly, I hate to mention names, but when they go like that, you don't want to give them the power, right? Like, they just move on. You don't don't dress them. Just
Rev actually, in my interview with Rev, mentioned that it was he says I was the first Christian to stand up to Hillbilly, which I thought was interesting. Like it was always only atheists, and then from now there's probably 2 other Christians now that stand up for Hillbilly and go, like, when he barges into Nadia's and says he, and asserts this sort of dehumanizing things onto her, that there's a couple other Christians now that'll stand up and go, that's not necessary. We don't need that here. And sometimes it takes just one person to say, look what this does to people. Why are we doing this? And
acceptable kind of thing. That's good.
Yeah, I think it's shitty to do it that way, and I think on the other end, I think there's an oversensitive there's a it reminds me a little bit of atheists who deconvert out of Christianity and have a vitriol, like their language is laced with vitriol, and they just spew hatred, and it I get it. I understand why they're taking the position, and I think that I see that with transgender individuals who transition and then become pronoun police. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's important to point it out to people, but when it comes from a place of, instead of a sincere desire to help an individual understand, and it becomes a point of poking back at the norm to people who genuinely might see it differently, were it approached with a little more gentleness and a little more understanding of people having to change their habits and their ways of thinking about things with exposure that will come naturally. I feel like it's a little bit of that. It's someone who has taken on the issue, finally found who they are and are comfortable with it, but kind of swing to the other end where it becomes counterproductive towards everybody coming to an understanding and having some openness to something that was foreign and unfamiliar. You've made it now extremely unpleasant and personal,
Well, I think a very similar thing happens when people deconvert. is that pendulum effect, and it's just like all the way over there, flailing, and it's not productive. Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, I think those people that are trans that make such a huge deal out of these small, innocuous, kind of don't mean anything things. Um, I think they do more harm. It's like they're like the nagging wife. Nobody likes the nagging wife. Stop being the fucking nagging wife. Like, if you're friggin' nitpicking about every little damn thing, you're gonna piss people off, and then they'll start doing it out of spite, or they'll be like, "Oh, I don't like transsexuals because they're always frickin' nagging about stupid little shit," and it doesn't. It does more to put people off than it does to be like, yeah, they're just normal people, because normal people don't nitpick about stupid shit like that.
It actually, so that's using the nagging wife analogy. It's a little like, and I'll say this to my wife. I'll say, help me understand why I should do it that way, because when you just give me the rule or whatever, it doesn't help me it doesn't bridge the gap for me. And I think a little bit in that, you have to, it's a matter of persuading other people. It's a little like the atheist, agnostic, theist thing that Ozzy and Aaron Ra talked about. My position is, let's persuade. If we're worried about the stigma around the word, let's be civil and persuasive and encourage people to think differently about atheists rather than caring about the term so much. And I think it's a little bit of the same thing with gender or any. It really applies. It ends up applying to any issue. Is be persuasive in the reasons for why it is you think that that's a persuasive position, and then you won't have to. Those things will come naturally. All the little things you're worried about, people will start using the right pronouns, and they'll, when they come to see you as a person who they want to respect and they want to understand who you are, but you're not going to get there by just dropping the rules on them. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Right.
Thank you for saying what I said so much more eloquently. I appreciate
But don't you think some people
it's the
though?
vodka.
Some people do it just to assert weirdness. I mean, and you got to recognize the difference between an accident or somebody and that. Sorry if you hear that. My husband builds drones. He's quite the hobbyist, and I don't know why, but it's going crazy. I don't understand.
A terrorist or hobbyist?
Shh.
My dogs are going nuts over it. They're looking.
Hello, habibi.
No, and I don't think we should tolerate the people who if you come in and you're doing it simply to be offensive, well, fuck you. I don't want to talk to you then. I don't think we have to put up with that. But I think we have to be careful not to lump in everybody who uses the wrong pronoun maybe twice in a conversation or something. Like it gets obnoxious, and I think it has to be a gentle correction. Fight a battle at a time. Don't worry about pointing it. It's a little like it is like the nagging wife. It's like, give me one thing to do. Let's focus on one thing this month, and then next month, then we can focus on a different thing. Don't lay out all the issues right away.
Well, yeah, and I might be genuinely confused when I'm talking to you, right? Like, and just like Jennifer had made that mistake about saying the daughter's mom, right? In that conversation, like you trip up sometimes, right? And you've got to allow for that, and not everybody's doing it on purpose to piss you off, or I mean.
Yeah, so there are people out there who have, I'm sure y'all have heard of gaydar. There's some people that have this knack for, seeing very masculine features, and even some of the most feminine of trans people. They just have this thing, and while they try to be respectful and understand, to use the correct pronouns, we've been so ingrained with, if it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, then it's a duck. And we have these, these visual cues that were brought up earlier that trigger our mind to kind of go on autopilot, and it just, like got a beard. Well, it's just kind of what your mind does, and so understanding that this is something that happens. Like me being trans, I've talked to other trans people and misused pronouns. I've done it myself, and so to understand that that it's just something that's been ingrained in us. To go off of these visual cues, and that it's just an instantaneous thing that your mind does. And when you're just talking, you kind of do this, and you're not thinking through every single word that you're saying. Sometimes it comes out.
And I'm not, like, if you were saying that and I were to trip up, I'm not doing that to, like I said, hurt you or push you into that category, right? It's just
Yeah.
for the tongue kind of thing, and you've got to be aware that that happens.
It's always about context with me, you know.
Well, I think we're coming up on 3 hours, and usually I try to keep these about 3 hours for the on-air portion. But we're going to continue off-air. I'll put the link in the chat if anybody wants to join. You can go ahead and ping me, or you can grab this link when I get it there, the vodka. And I want to thank you to Jennifer for a wonderful chat, and hopefully we exchange some thoughts in the future. And I really enjoyed this. Thank you for taking time out on Saturday to discuss this with us, and thank you to everybody that joined.
Yeah, well, it's Sunday morning for me, so no skin off my back. I didn't miss any of my Saturday. But yeah, it was great to be here. Thank you for having me. And anytime you have anyone who's watching, feel free. Questions. I am an open book. I have no problem answering any questions you have. Shoot me a PM, or contact me through my YouTube page, whatever. Blah blah. Shameless plug.
Check out Jennifer's page, and thanks again, and thank you again to my audience. You guys are all fantastic and always engaging questions, and to all the panelists as well. So thank you, and happy weekend, and stay warm, everyone.